All right, everybody, let's get started. Good afternoon and welcome to another sports business and broadcast Zoom meeting. My name is Dave Leno. It has been an honor and pleasure to host these meetings over a month plus. I take a lot of pride in this, getting ready for them as all you do, attending them. We've had a lot of people that have been what I call day one, men and women that have been a part of this, and I can't thank you enough for coming on here on this free forum where we can all come together, learn from one another, share career advice, better yet, connect with one another, and talk some positivity and uplifting messages during this time when a lot of us, being that we're broadcasters, are not on the air. So to start this, ladies and gentlemen, these are some things I want you to think about as today's meeting goes on. One of the topics that I remember, you see me all decked out in Indiana gear, but when I was in journalism school, and I think it still applies today, ever more so than back then, and that's convergence media, exploring different areas in journalism. So if you view yourself as just a play-by-play announcer or a radio host or a public address announcer like you'll hear today from our two talented guests, I think you need to explore different versions of the media and make yourself more applicable to all the jobs out there that may come open. So you can't be narrow-minded and tunnel-focused when jobs do open up, and if it's sports or news that you're in returns and there's more opportunities for you out there, I wouldn't just say I want to go to be a play-by-play guy in football or in basketball or just call volleyball games. I think we all need to be open-minded and get some work to get back on our feet. On that note, today's meeting, I know a lot of you wrote to me and your questions upon registering about the job market, and I know you'll have questions for Kevin and Colin about how they got to where they are and what their journey was like. And a lot of you have been writing to me personally about, how do I go after those new teams, those networks that might have ignored my work in the past, but now you're getting more experience. Where will the jobs be? Will they be on more so on the radio side, the league side, the team size, college, high school, etc.? And this is one that I've constantly been focusing on, is how do you deal with an employer whose bottom line is not that good, where they may be right now operating in the red? And how do you stay on? Maybe you have to take less money. Maybe you don't get paid right away. So these are some of the things that you constantly have to be thinking about. And this no limits to the events you call goes on to the first thing I said upon opening this meeting. You got to say yes to a lot of things, especially when it's a sport that maybe you have not put yourself in yet, or it's an area, whether it's more writing than broadcasting, or maybe starting a podcast, or connecting with people on here and doing a show, or just writing a simple blog, or creating a website, or refurbishing your website. These are some of the things I want you to keep in mind as today's meeting goes along. Long preamble, obviously, for today's agenda. And today it is public address announcer focused, but we can go in several different avenues with that. It's not solely going to be just announcing, but also about how to be a successful talent in the sports media field. Today we will interview Kevin and Colin. I will introduce them shortly. Following that, we'll have a Q&A with those guys and yourselves. After that, they're welcome to stay on. We'll review the interview on the back side of this, and we'll forecast the next few months as sports are starting to return, which is very exciting. I hope all of you don't go crazy with the spotting boards as you see me there with the beautiful mine color-coded boards there. Today, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to have two extremely talented voices in sports that I call friends, and I work with both of these men. I've known them for a while from both afar and personally. Both of them, I think a lot of you know and did your research coming into this, have established themselves as one of the top voices in public address announcing sphere. Today, we'll have Kevin Casey on. Kevin I work with at the Philadelphia Union. As you see, he also does LaSalle and Drexel basketball, Penn soccer. U.S. soccer matches, also FIFA matches he's called, also has worked NCAA tournaments as well with lacrosse and soccer. And these are only some of the things that Kevin has done. I know he has been the PA guy for the Philadelphia Kicks, the Philadelphia Phantoms as well in the AHL. And also we worked together when I was an intern, in fact, with the Camden River Sharks in the Atlantic League, one of my favorite beginnings in broadcasting. So can't wait to have Kevin on and get his perspective. We also have Colin Cosell. Colin is one of the PA announcers with Marisol Castro of the New York Mets. So it's great to get his perspective with Major League Baseball possibly returning. Colin I work with in particular as well with the New York Riptide of the National Lacrosse League at Nassau Coliseum. So it's great to hear from Colin about how he landed that gig and what it's like, the differences of broadcasting Major League Baseball and the box lacrosse game. Colin is also the voice of the New York Open ATP event. That's part of the tennis tour professionally, which takes place at Nassau. You see the MSG Varsity and Verizon Fios One Sports. He also has a background in play-by-play broadcasting as well, where he's won 3 Emmys with MSG Varsity and also has been a play-by-play broadcaster with Verizon Fios One Sports. It goes without saying, he is the proud grandson of the most legendary broadcaster in our industry, Howard Cosell. So that is a long intro to the men that are joining us today. And I am pleased to welcome Kevin Casey and Colin Cosell. Kevin, we'll start with you. Hopefully your family's healthy, and how are you doing throughout all this?
Doing great, Dave. Thank you so much for the invitation here. You've had some heavy hitters in the first couple of episodes here, so hopefully Colin and I can somehow match what Sean McDonough has been on, right? Kevin Harlan, I think, was on as well. So hopefully we can provide some level of information for everybody from a public address side of this. So I appreciate the invite.
You're welcome. And you guys got to think of yourself as the cleanup hitters or batting 4th, 5th, 6th, and you're going to smack in those ribbies. So thanks, Kevin, for coming on. Colin, we want to say hello to you. And how are you doing throughout this pandemic? Hopefully everything's going well and everybody's healthy on your end.
Hi, Dave. First of all, thanks for having me. To echo what Kevin just said, I'm kind of humbled to be here. Don't feel like I quite belong, but here I am nonetheless. To be honest with you, these times are scary. They're strange. They're weird. But fortunately, my wife and I didn't really get to spend all that much time together. If we had a weekend together, it was a blessing. So we've now had something like 10 consecutive weekends together. So we're actually very happy. We've got a puppy named Bagel. He's never been happier, and been a whole lot of home cooking. And yeah, just trying to keep busy, and it could be exponentially worse, all things considered.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you on the cooking theme. We're doing a lot of that in this household, that's for sure. I want to start by, asking you guys, you gave us an update on how you're doing health-wise, but I think you both are doing fascinating work, keeping relevant today, which has been a theme throughout these Zoom broadcast meetings. Kevin, you're hosting, for those that don't know, a Life Without Soccer series with your family, which you invited me to be a part of one of those episodes where I did mock play-by-play of some soccer tennis. I'll say to everybody out there, if you haven't seen it, go to Kevin's Twitter at KCasey395, also on YouTube as well. Kevin, it's brought a lot of smiles to tons of faces out there. So I want to ask you first and foremost, for those that are familiar and those that are looking it up now, what was the brainchild of that series, and what's it been like for you and your family?
So it's interesting, Dave. I'm a guy that likes to have a lot of fun and keep it light. And, so what we had was, it was the home opener for the Philadelphia Union. And of course, that was right at the beginning in March. And up until about Thursday of the Saturday match, we were still playing it, and then it, of course, gets canceled. And so the idea behind it was, well, I don't have a match to announce, so what am I going to announce? And so I decided with my oldest daughter, Leno, that we would record this video of me suited up at the bow tie and everything, and just announcing things around the house. So I went out to the mailbox and I announced that there is no mail. I repeat, the mailman has not arrived. And, you know, I talked to her, she talked me into going to the local Starbucks, and I sat at the bar while somebody ordered something and I announced their order as they went past me. And, you know, we went through a Wendy's drive-through and she talked me into making the order in an announcer's sort of register. So that sort of just built on it. And we've kind of just been seeing how positively they've been received. And you're right, Dave, like that, if that can bring a smile to somebody's face, then we've sort of done our job. And that's kind of how I've looked at it, right? And it's been a great way for me to stay connected with the fan base of the Union as well. So we're having a great time doing them. And the idea is we're going to keep doing them until we get back to soccer. So I hope that happens soon, because I'm running out of ideas. So I'm open to any ideas that anybody might have. But it's been a great way to stay connected. You know, that's kind of what we've been doing.
I love the recent episode with the dance party. I told you it was like an ensemble from like a Bollywood movie at the end. It's just awesome seeing your kids on there, and it does bring a smile to everybody's face. I love it. Colin, right on that respect, you're doing some awesome hashtag Call Me Up Colin series, which, you know, you've asked fans publicly on social media to give their name, you know, a number, and you also lay a walk-up song, a music bed under all of this, which has, you know, really taken the media by storm. You've gotten some great publicity out of this, and I know that's not first and foremost what you were looking to do. Like Kevin, you're spreading the word and getting everybody, you know, happy and cheery out there, especially connecting with your New York Mets fan base. It has been phenomenal listening to you and Kevin and I. We talked about this prior to starting this meeting. It's been a lot of work for you too. You've been, you know, the announcer, the music engineer, the editor. So I know it's been a labor of love for you, and you're giving back in more ways than I think anybody could think about. So thank you for doing that first and foremost. And how did that idea come about?
Well, thank you for the kind words. And a friend of mine just asked me, how do you still have a voice? And it's, there's a lot of tea, and then whiskey at night. But and this all started in 2018, December of 2018. I just completed my first season with the Mets, and I had some pretty big shoes to fill at Citi Field. Alex Anthony had been the PA announcer there for over 15 years. Fans loved him. They were accustomed to his voice. He was there in the transition from Shea to City. And excuse me, I knew that it was going to be a tough transition. So I took it upon myself that December, just before Christmas, to try to connect with the fans via Twitter and get them to familiarize themselves with my voice. And so I put it out there on Twitter. Hey, the first 10 that respond, I'm going to record a call up like I would in the ballpark. You can use it as a Christmas gift, Hanukkah gift, Kwanzaa gift, whatever you want to do with it, or just for yourself, blah, 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 blah. Got about around 90 responses. And after it was all said and done, and I put them out there, you know, I read some people's responses, and they're like, oh man, I missed out. You know, I'm kind of bummed. And I'm like, well, I feel bad. I'm new. I want to kind of appease everyone. So not to discredit the contest, so to speak. After the holidays had passed, I then proceeded to record the rest of them and produce them as well. And it was great. It was a lot of fun, and it really, I've created some friendships with fans as a result of that. Fast forward a year and a half, Saturday, March 14th, the order comes in for New York State stay-at-home orders, and I realized at this point that, you know, I was feeling really bummed that baseball was done indefinitely. There was no telling when it was going to return. I was fortunate that I was down at Port St. Lucie, called a couple of games to get warmed up for a season that was now, you know, on the brink. And the fans, I saw their reactions. I was scrolling through Twitter, and, you know, just the dismay, the depression, just the overwhelming sadness. And I said, you know what, now's the time. We can have this synergetic movement where I react, you know, I put this out there, and give them an opportunity to take the ballpark home with them, do with it as they please. And for me, it allows me to be in the booth, so to speak, and keeps me busy, you know, by producing all of these. And yeah, it started out with like 1 or 200, and I did one for Tom Kaminsky, who is the traffic guy, is the traffic ace of CBS 880 in New York, and he and I forged a friendship through my job at the Mets. And after that, he played it for some friends of his. One of the reporters there, Peter Haskell, decided he wanted to do a report on it, and then it just kind of snowballed from there, and more and more interviews, and then it went national, and CNN, Fox News Channel, the Associated Press, and that all happened in 1 week. And it went from 2 to 300 to 500 to 800, and now I have about 800 in the can, with another at least 300 to go. Last night on Twitter, and finally, it's just, I have too many other things in the works right now. I've got to think about my future, and I'm kind of turning my sights towards helping fellow announcers and broadcasters, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But I put the kibosh on it last night. Told everyone I will finish every single request that came in, but as of midnight last night, Call Me Up Colin is on the shelf for now. I'll allow a few. I started prioritizing, by the way, for first responders, people that are on the front lines, ER, medical workers, and teachers. I come from a family of teachers, and I know their lives have been upended, and of course children as well, who are missing out on their little league seasons. And so I'm going to finish them all up when I'm done. There will be close to 1,200 of them. They take about 10 minutes per, so if you do the math on that, it's pretty exhausting. But it's been 55 days, 1,200 call-ups requested, 800 of them recorded. And it's been an absolutely wild ride, not what I expected at all. But I still have my voice, I still have my sanity, and it's time to move on and help my brethren and sistren in the booth.
Yeah, you're doing great work. I know a lot of people on here have seen this, and those are probably looking it up right now. It goes without saying, keep it up, and I hope that the last 300 that you have left all goes smoothly. And it was an awesome. I think you'll look back on this several years from now and say it was just an unbelievable experience. And I'm sure you're meeting all these people that you never would have the chance to connect with. That's awesome. Before I go into your backgrounds for both of you, I want to ask, starting with Kevin, because a lot of folks, they ask me questions upon registering, and many of them asked me, being that you guys are public address announcers, what it would be like. You're back in the booth. There's no fans, if that's the case when sports returns. You're still calling the match for the essential personnel, let's say, are the players, the coaches, some staff for the game, et cetera. And your voice will be heard on the stream or on a TV or radio broadcast. But Kevin, what would it be like to do that match, hear your voice echo and reverberate against the seats, but there's nobody physically there in the stands? Have you pondered that yet?
Thought about that in too much depth yet, but I can just tell you right now, as you're asking that question, that for me, I really, as a PA announcer, feed off the energy of the crowd, right? So I think doing soccer, and Colin, box lacrosse is like this, because I did the wings for a bunch of years too, right? So we feed off that energy from the crowd. So, and when it's a big goal in a big spot, and you really sort of get excited about it, right? But I kind of think that it'll be more impactful and more powerful for me to make a goal call in an empty stadium, because what I'm trying to do at that point is I want everybody in the Delaware Valley who's watching it on TV to hear that goal call and know that that goal call is being made. Not for every one of those empty seats, there's somebody watching that's part of the family of the Union, right? That I think it would be more powerful for me to make that call to an empty stadium, because I'm trying to reach everybody watching it on TV in the Delaware Valley and let them know that they're being thought of and they're being included in all of this. So I think, Dave, it's actually going to be a more emotional, more powerful moment to do a goal call, trying to sort of reach that fan base that I mean, the Union fan base is one that I truly love. I truly love interacting with them on social media. And just having that opportunity to sort of say, we're almost there. That's kind of what it's going to be like. So I'm really looking forward to having that opportunity.
Colin, have you thought about this, taking that drive to Queens, pulling up at Citi Field, taking the elevator up to the press level, hopping on the mic, and there you go with the introductions or your program, and there's nobody in the seats. It's your voice just echoing against the stands. What's your take on it?
It's a bit jarring. The baseball, that energy, it ebbs and flows as the game progresses based on the team's success. Whereas with the Riptide and with box lacrosse, it is constant high energy. It is, even if the team is not doing well, you're still going at 80%. Whereas if the Mets are down 14-2 in the second inning, I'm going to tone it down to like a 30 to 40%. I read the crowd and the game during baseball, so it's a bit different because to echo what Kevin said, I feed off that energy. The crowd's energy is what fuels me, and that is when because everyone's back is to me, essentially. At least everyone who's in front of me, their backs are to me. So I'm talking at the backs of people. And in that moment that I announced Pete Alonso up to bat, I know that as soon as I say the first baseman, number 20, Pete Alonso, that crowd is going to go nuts because everyone loves Pete Alonso. And in that moment, we have that synergy. We are experiencing it together. My bread and butter, no matter what, before the start of a baseball game is announcing the starting lineup. And if it's a game that DeGrom is starting, he's always going to be batting last. He's always going to be the last one I call. And, batting ninth, the starting pitcher, number 40, and the crowd just goes ballistic, and I'm going nuts too. And that's all adrenaline because we don't know if we're going to win or lose at that point. Everything is at maximum. So that's going to be a bit jarring if they do have me back in the ballpark. But at the same time, I hadn't really considered it until Kevin said it, but people that are going to be watching at home, they're going to hear it. They're going to hear it loud and clear. I often joked with my wife that, she knew when I was at work because she could, turn on the game and hear my voice in the background and know that I was safe and sound if I was too busy to give a call and tell her I was safe. And that was, one of the cool things about this job. Well, now it's going to be all you hear. It's going to be your play-by-play guys and the PA announcer. So when you put it that way, it kind of, I have to envision the crowd. I have to envision that synergy. But I know that at home, especially if we are able to start up baseball this year, that people are going to be going nuts at home. And I just have to remind myself of that. I do think it would be more powerful if it were the Riptide and announcing, the Riptide goal and, without the crowd there because then it brings that same energy that the players are used to and to the fans at home. But Kevin, that's a phenomenal point that I really hadn't considered. And I guess it's kind of selfish on my part because, I don't want to be just relegated to my tiny little booth along Radio Row in Citi Field. I want to be part of the action as well. And in these trying times and in whatever the new normal is going to be, I just would have to reinvent what that synergy feels like. So great point by Kevin.
I think it's an analogous case to somebody that's in play-by-play, in particular on TV, where more and more games are being done from the studio. So I think you'll still have to have that energy, that intensity of all the studio games I've done, and whether it's been myself on the call or watching others like JP Delacamera with Philadelphia Union and 6 ABC studios in Philly and others. You still have to match that same intensity with tone, pitch, volume, the same way as if you are seeing a crowd of 18,000 or Colin in your case of over 40,000 in the stands. So I want to go into both your backgrounds because a lot of folks are definitely interested in that. Kevin, I'll go back to you on this theme. You attended Eastern University and you played soccer there. And from what I understand and read in preparation for today's Zoom is that your coach also worked the men's basketball games. And I believe he was the public address announcer, and you asked him to work a couple of those games, which maybe led to you being an announcer on those men's basketball games at Eastern University. Did that start the PA announcing craft for you? If not, where was it fostered?
100%, Dave. So yeah, I went to Eastern University. Go Eagles. I played soccer for a year and a half before I realized that my feet are just too slow, even at the Division III level. So I sort of hung up the boots my sophomore year. And my soccer coach, who was also the athletic director at Eastern, was doing the public address announcing for the men's basketball games. And I'm sitting in the stands my sophomore year, and my girlfriend, now my wife of 20 years, I said to her, I think I'd like to give that a shot. And went and talked to him, and he couldn't give me the microphone fast enough. I think he was really looking to be done with it. So had really no idea what to expect. That's mid 90s, 95, right? So I grabbed all of my Jock Jams CDs and came down, and this is when game presentation was sort of just really starting to develop, right? And we're seeing all that now with the Last Dance documentary, right? Because I really think the Chicago Bulls were the ones who really took game presentation to the next level. And I did my best to just try and sort of recreate a little of that, and it was really well received. I then take that and start doing most of the sports at Eastern University. My first professional job was with the Philadelphia Kicks, and I actually served as Adam Hertz, who was the public address announcer. I kind of was his assistant. And, you know, as a young guy in the industry, I would want to do anything I could to be anywhere in professional sports. So I was literally turning the pages for him for the first year or two. And then I got the opportunity to fill his seat. And then, you know, it's like anything else. One door opens another door, opens another door. And over the course of the last 20 plus years, you know, I've had an opportunity to be involved with most of the professional sports in the Delaware Valley region. So I've been with the Kicks, I've been with the Phantoms, the Wings. I've done baseball up in Allentown with a team called the Allentown Ambassadors, Atlantic City with the Atlantic City Surf, Camden River Sharks. And so, you know, that level of versatility, I think, really served me well going forward, because I had so many sports under my wing, if you will, and had some experience doing that. And then the other thing that I'll say really prepared me for the next level was working in minor league baseball. If you haven't had the opportunity to, I highly recommend working in minor league baseball, because it prepares you to handle any scenario and situation, because so little is scripted, right? Now, Colin, with you at the Mets, right, everything is meticulous and down to the hot second, right?
There's 100%.
Yeah, there was times when I was doing River Sharks games where it would be time for first pitches, and next thing you know, there's 12 first pitches. I have no idea who they are, where they come from, and I've got to try to make this all work. You know, we did the announcing on a wireless microphone, and I would jump over the railing for the in-between inning contest, and, you know, we'd let the little kids announce batters, which was a cool thing. But that experience, as I made my way up the ranks, you know, eventually got into MLS soccer with the Union, where everything is so highly produced and structured. If something does go awry, I can call on that background and feel confident about my ability to sort of ad-lib and make it appear like we wanted it to look that way. So I think that experience. But the big takeaway, Dave, I think from all of this is, if I didn't have the courage that winter night at Eastern University to go to the athletic director and say, I think I want to give this a shot, I would have missed out on all of this, right? So the big takeaway is, you know, be bold enough to ask, because the worst they're going to say is no, right? And then ask again after that, and keep asking until you get your shot. And then the other takeaway is that as doors open for you, which they inevitably will, make every opportunity to barrel your way into the room, right? Because doors will open for you. But as young individuals in the profession, it's your responsibility to take that opportunity and get yourself into the room, and don't let them let you out of the room, you know, and really make the most of opportunities, you know. So that's kind of been my story. And I've been lucky enough to really develop my niche in Philadelphia with the soccer. So I've got a chance to really do a lot of the international games, not only in Philly, but also up in New York as well. And the club teams coming in from Europe, I've had a chance to call a lot of their matches. You know, it's a tough market in Philadelphia. If you look at our public address announcers in Philadelphia, Lou Nolan, Philadelphia Flyers public address announcer, has been the public address announcer for the last 48 years. All right. Dan Baker, Philadelphia Phillies, 48 years. And he also did the Eagles for a number of years. So there hasn't been a whole lot of opportunity to crack into some of those top four. So having the ability to make a niche in soccer, which I love, I'm a huge soccer guy. Love my Toffees, Everton of the Premier League, huge supporter of them. So, to be able to work in that industry is just been a blessing to me.
It's been great, being friends with you, and you've been very influential in my rise in the business, and I can't thank you enough. And I'll say that publicly to everybody. You've helped me in many ways along my path and have been an ear for me. And, I love what you said about the versatility. And I tell people that on every Zoom. And, a lot of broadcasters have different opinions on this, but, I think, and I say this line all the time, that it sharpens your game calling. And, you mentioned all the different sports that you called, and Colin, we'll get to yours in just a moment. I think that only helps you on your career path. Mainly just meeting all these different people, and your network is growing over time. And that helps open doors for you and get more gigs, which I know we have a lot of younger people on here, so they can learn from somebody like yourself, Kevin, on that. Thanks for explaining your background. Colin, let's go to you now. Growing up in Stamford, Connecticut, you went to the King's School in high school. I read that you were a high school hockey player and also soccer. I also read that you have a background in theater and also a comedy background. You at one point interned for SNL. Love to get your thoughts on that. Any cool stories there? I'm also was in West Side Story, which is one of my favorites. But I want to know, was broadcasting a natural move for you just because of your lineage? And you can take that in any way you want about how you eventually made the move into the sports you're at currently.
So my path is definitely not a straight line, and I don't feel like anyone's really should be in this industry, and I'll get to that in a moment. I was 5 years old at my grandfather and Howard Cosell's summer house out in Long Island, southeast shore of Long Island, West Hampton Beach, and I realized that he had a microphone with headphones sitting on a dresser in his bedroom, about 4 feet away from his bed. And finally, one day I said, "Papa, what is that?" And he goes, "Well, I can do my radio show from here." And he'd put in enough years. We're talking, this is 1985. He'd put in enough years at ABC that they installed a microphone and a live line that went to ABC, so that if he wanted to go out east and relax a little bit, he could do so and still do his radio show. Well, I was enamored with this microphone, and I said, "Can I watch you do your radio show one day?" And he said, "Yeah, you'd have to get up early, but you could do that." So I had my grandmother wake me up, and it was about 5:30 a.m. And I watched my grandfather shuffle out to the front door, pick up the New York Times, skim through it a little bit, circle a couple things, sat down. He had a little chair that he was off to the side, pulled it over, sat down, put me up on his lap. I put on the headphones, and for the first time in my life, I spoke into a professional microphone. His producer's name was Eddie. I did my first ever sound check, and I fell in love with this piece of machinery in front of me, this piece of equipment. The rest is history. And I said, I want to do what Papa does, not knowing who Papa really was, because I was 5 years old. I just knew that sometimes we'd go around town in West Hampton Beach, and people will drive by and they'd be like, "Hey, Howie." And I'm like, first of all, why are they yelling at my grandfather? How do they know his name? And what is going on here? Like, you should see this guy without his toupee on. Like, I mean, he's not that impressive. So throughout the years, my grandfather would give me little tape recorders. I would tape, as I'm sure many of us did, tape little radio shows or make impromptu commercials or what have you, and have a lot of fun with that. I knew I'd love to perform. I knew I loved having an audience, a microphone or a camera in front of me. But as it turns out, in middle school and high school, especially in the 90s, at my school at least, they didn't have a professional studio. They didn't have any classes that catered to that. It was a small private school in Stamford, Connecticut. So my only outlet was theater. Very fortunately, I could sing and sing fairly well. So musical theater was it. And if you remember the show Glee, where you had, the guy who was the jock who was also singing, I like to joke and say I was Glee before Glee was Glee, because I was, captain and starting goalie of the varsity hockey team. I was, playing soccer as well. and then I was starring in the spring musical every year. So that actually that gave me the ability to kind of crack out of my shell, because when you're in front of a camera, you're behind a mic in a booth, your audience is not right there in front of you. It's live theater, they are. You screw up, they're gonna know, and that that can be a bit daunting, but nothing can really beat the live theater experience. Fast forward to college, I'm in class one day, and my professor was going through basically the Mount Rushmore of broadcasting, and he gets to my grandfather, and I am mortified. Now, my grandfather passed away when I was nearly 16 years old. I knew he was big at this point. I understood it, but I didn't know he was get taught about him in your college class kind of big. The professor gave some misinformation about when my grandfather left boxing and Monday Night Football. I corrected him. And I did this very sheepishly, mind you. I wasn't like, no, that's not how it was. It was like, sir, I was nervous as hell. And he said, how do you know this? And had to explain myself. Went back to my dorm room and I wept. I had pretty much a panic attack, because I was like, there's no way I could do this. So I then spent my 20s. I graduated with a degree in communications, radio, and television broadcast with a minor in drama studies, but I spent my 20s finding every other possible outlet except for sports, because I did not want to follow the footsteps and be in the gigantic shoes of Howard Cosell. Started doing stand-up comedy in 2001. It was great for a few months, and then 9/11 happened, completely transformed the way stand-up comedy was approached and how the country laughed. It changed the sense of humor of the country. But I continued doing that for years. I loved it. Started doing voiceover work, got into radio. I was a radio news anchor and reporter for a couple of years. That drove me nuts because it was so depressing. And just kind of bounced around throughout my 20s. And and by the way, I forgot to mention that, yes, the 99-2000 season, I interned at Saturday Night Live. An amazing experience, taught me what real production is like in a frantic, frenetic, electrifying kind of environment. No real funny stories, except Will Ferrell gave me a hug when I first joined and said, welcome to the family. Also, I could never imitate your grandfather, and I hate you for that. And that was the funny story there. But there's some other ones along the way as well. Tracy Morgan, I could go on forever, but those are probably better off in private because it's Tracy Morgan. Anyway, so yeah, I bounced around in my 20s, which I kind of regret in hindsight, because I felt like there was a lot of picking up the slack by the time I was turning 30. And a friend of mine said, it's time you followed your destiny. You want to get into sports? Let's do this. I can help you. He was a producer in television. Seemed all well and good. Opened some doors because of my last name, which was also a double-edged sword, because we'll let you in, but are you any good? And the last name carries some weight with it. And I knew that. And, my background was in theater and stand-up comedy. Howard Cosell was a lawyer, and a damn good one, until he was 38 years old, was the smartest human being I'd ever met in my life. And there was no way we were going to be compared to each other. He was a walking thesaurus, and me, I'm a walking smartass. So like, how are you going to compare the two? I like to inject humor into my broadcast, and he was deadpan with everything, telling you how it was, pissing off the fans at home who didn't want to hear it. And so, it was just going to be a different approach. Needless to say, at that point, there was also Syracuse, Newhouse was just pumping kids out into ESPN and all the outlets, because they were really good. At this point, Newhouse was firing on all cylinders, and I couldn't compete with them. I was older. I was going to come with a higher price tag, and I was a bit of a loose cannon, so to speak. These kids they were new, they were safe, and they were cheaper. It was impossible for me to get work. Luckily, a gentleman named Marty Ehrlich took a chance on me, brought me into this brand new network called MSG Varsity, allowed me some sideline reporting gigs, gave me my reps, got me more and more gigs, color commentary, play-by-play, and as well as anchoring. They had a show called High School Sports Desk, which was basically their equivalent of Sports Center. It was all high school sports in the tri-state area. And I learned a ton, narrated some shows for them. I mean, I really did some production and some writing. I mean, really got an immense amount of experience in the short 5 years that network existed. And then garnered 3 Emmys along the way, which I was just in the right place at the right time, truth be told. But still, it was an unbelievable experience until boom, the network suddenly, Cablevision or Spectrum pulls the plug on that, and I'm back to square one rather. And all the Emmys in the world don't immediately get you a job. You have to have, either the right connections or what have you. I ended up falling into bartending. I needed to make money, and I never bartended a day in my life. And this is advice I would give to anyone who's young. If you're able to fudge it and get away with it, do so. Someone asked me if I could bartend. I said I could. I'd never bartended a day in my life, fudged it, pulled it off, became an expert bartender, a manager, got poached by a major sports bar in Manhattan. And this is where things get interesting. I became a manager there, and one day I came into work. They had hired a new new waitress. That woman is now my wife. Her name is Julia, and had no idea that I had met my wife. We had a customer one day. I just started this job. He had been in television production. I just landed this job as the executive producer of in-game marketing and promotions with the New York Mets. That man is now my boss. And we became friends first. And you fast forward to April of 2018. I was at a game, and I shot him a text. I said, "Hey, Joe, I happen to be at the game." He said, "Hey, it'll be great to see you. I haven't seen you in a bit." At that point, I'd quit the bar that we had met at. And he said, "Listen, we're looking for a new PA announcer. If you want to give me your demo, we'll see what happens. I can't make any guarantees. I can just put it in the right hands." Fast forward 1 month later, and I got the job with the Mets. Was able to leave the restaurant and bar industry from the Mets. My co-PA announcer, Marisol Castro, was offered a job to be the PA announcer for the New York Riptide. She has a lot of things going on. She's the busiest woman in the world. And I'm very fortunate that we share this job, and we have become very close friends, more like a sibling kind of thing. Like, she's the older sister that I knew it never really needed, and I'm the younger brother she didn't know she wanted. We mess with each other constantly. It's brilliant. But she reached out to me and said, "Hey, Riptide's looking for someone. I think it'd be perfect for this." And from the Riptide, they're owned by GF Sports Holdings. They said, "Hey, we need a host for the New York Open ATP tennis tour stop." And that happened. And it all kind of snowballed. So again, it went all over the place. I know it sounded like it was a disjointed story, but believe it or not, with the exception of the Saturday Night Live tidbit, it was all in chronological order. It's just been a crazy ride. And now at age 40, I'm married. My friend is now my boss, being the boss, not my wife. She's my best friend. And I'm living my dream, and it's unbelievable. Again, the rug has been pulled out from underneath me with this pandemic, but I know I'll be back there again one day. And I know I'm the luckiest man in the world to be doing what I love and to not have to follow in the footsteps of Howard Cosell.
Thank you, Colin, for sharing that. And the biggest takeaway for me, just hearing all that background, is your circuitous path. And like you said from the get-go, it's not a straight line. And for a lot of us on here, and it's happened to me, and I'm sure it's happened to many of you, you're with a team, a year, 2 years, or an organization, and for one reason or another, team folds, you're not part of the plans in year 2 or year 3, or just something happens that just doesn't go your favor. And the way you stuck it out, grinded, I really applaud that. And the same with Kevin's journey too. I like to think of myself in those shoes as I'm climbing the business. And I think many on here, even if they're not broadcasters, I can relate to that. It goes with, saying yes to all these opportunities. And if you weren't at that bar, like you said, you wouldn't have met your boss at the Mets. I found that just fascinating and awesome. I definitely have a lot of questions in particular about what you guys do to get ready for your particular games. But I'm going to leave a lot of that to the participants that want to do the Q&A. So I'll try to stop myself after this question and ask you guys just to give us your game day routines, because I know a lot of people wrote that to me and they want to ask you some questions with some advice. But again, I'll leave that to the participants. So Kevin, if you're calling, you can take this any way you want. If you want to do Philadelphia Union, or if you want to do a few sports, what's it like upon getting ready, leaving your home, getting ready for a game, the drive to the stadium? What are you thinking about? And then when you get to the venue, how do you get ready for your call, which I know that production starts well before kickoff for you or whatever sport you're doing.
Yeah, so I'll sort of walk you through the MLS experience of calling a union match. So I'm about 20 minutes away from the stadium. I leave my house about 3 hours before the match. We usually will have a production meeting in the match about 2 hours prior to the match. And, I think most of the people on this call understand what goes into a game production, but a lot of people who come to the match don't realize, how intricate a game production is within the stadium itself. Multiple cameras, the graphics boards, the LED ribbons, the music. We all sort of need to be on the same page, and so everything is very highly scripted. And so in that production meeting, we'll go through the script line by line, item by item, and a lot of it is sort of the same as far as sponsorship reads and things like that. Ceremonies that might be taking place either before the match or at halftime are addressed. And for me, as a public address announcer, and this is a nod to Bob Shepard. I once heard him in a CNN interview in which Bob Shepard said that there are 3 C's to do in the public address. You be clear, be concise, and be correct. And so I don't care if it's Zlatan Ibrahimovic or if it's little Johnny doing the pregame kick. I want to get their names right. It's literally the only job that I have is to say a name correctly, right? So I take a lot of pride in that. So if there's names in the pre-match ceremonies or at halftime, I make sure that I get pronunciations from them from somebody's within game operations. And then after the production meeting, I'll usually head down to the press area, grab the media notes, and do my first look over of the rosters. Soccer, of course, we've got a lot of names with interesting pronunciations. MLS, of course, and I'm sure many do now, make a pronunciation guide on the roster, so you sort of get that phonetic spelling. For those of you who are in the college world and might be SIDs, we always value and look at the SID based on how easy and how well their pronunciation guides are, right? So I'll look for that, and then we'll usually get something to eat. I usually will seek out the visiting team's PR guy, because sometimes phonetically it looks one way, but maybe it's not really how it sounds. So I usually will try and go through that and with them as well. And then from there, we're starting game presentation, a solid hour and a half, hour or so before the match with different sponsorship reads and things like that. And so, you develop the ability to talk and be able to announce with guys talking in your ear, right? And that's a common thing within the play-by-play world as well. So we have a producer who's calling everything, and he's got to talk to other elements while I'm announcing. So being able to sort of separate that while you're projecting is another useful skill as well. So that's essentially, some matches, it's a longer, like when I do the U.S. soccer matches, it's a longer time where you're getting there and in place, and it's a lot of hurry up and wait in those matches. A lot of the internationals. The other thing I found too is that when you're doing international matches, national team matches, a lot of times you have less guidance or help on names because you don't have as much material available to you. So you don't have necessarily. I've had some horror stories where we had the U.S. women's national team into Philly against the national team of China, and no help on the Chinese names. So, we just kind of made our best. And here's the other thing too. Here's the other secret. And Colin, you might be able to speak to this. When you say something, just say it with confidence, right? Because there's only 30% of the people who are truly listening to you in the seats, right? So as long as you say it confidently, you can sort of make your way through it. But it's when you have to go back and say correction, right? That's the worst word in the PA announcer's lexicon is correction, because now 100% of the people know you screwed up, right? So there's a little tip for you. Just say things with confidence. And if you know you might have stumbled somewhere along the way, man, just keep plugging through and just act like you meant to do it that way. So it's sort of a life lesson too, right? Fake it till you make it, I guess, right? sort of a glimpse there, Dave, into the pre-match look, and then probably the most important thing is making sure I get my brownies and chocolate chip cookies before the game too, right from the press dining. So that's about it.
Of course, got to get all that. But I know some announcers have said lay off the popcorn, right? And that's definitely a snack for me when I'm broadcasting, which maybe I shouldn't do. But anyhow, Colin, with the Mets, with the New York Riptide, take this any way you want. But what is your pregame preparation to execute a successful PA gig for you on game day?
I won't be as long-winded as my last story. So with Major League Baseball, luckily they send out a phonetic chart with pronunciations of all the teams, which is all well and good, except for people get sent down and called up all the time. There's trades and so on. So leading into a series in the days before, I will double check who I will most likely see, make sure I get that pronunciation correct. And that will be leading up to it. On game day, I make my what I call my miracle elixir. It is of Manuka honey. It is throat coat tea, a couple bags of that, slippery elm powder, a little bit of apple cider vinegar. That's this thing that's out there. It also has Manuka honey in it. And I just make this big old thermos of it. And that stuff is amazing. Gargle with it. It's amazing. And a little bit of lemon juice as well. So I'll start drinking that. I'll drink about half of it on my way to the ballpark. My commute used to be 10 minutes. Then my wife and I moved out to Eastern Long Island in July, and now it's an hour and 10 minutes. But in the remaining 20 minutes of the car ride, vocal exercises, warming up my mouth, doing your classic red leather, yellow leather, and you need unique New York's kind of those kinds of things. Just making sure the mouth is like ready to go. But I also show up about 2 hours before first pitch. So that's kind of like preliminary to make sure I'm there. At least my mouth is not going to go back to sleep on me. As soon as I get there, the first thing I do is go right into the booth, go through the scripts. For baseball, pretty much everything is scripted. And if there are names, to Kevin's point, if there are names of first pitch, honorary first pitch, a group of people that are in town, and I can agree with that. We had an award for it was a Taiwanese group, and pronouncing their names was just pure gold. I mean, that was fun. Sarcasm dripping there. And I'll double check with all the pronunciations, wait for the starting lineups to come in. Then I will also, if I have any questions, go into the visiting radio booth, check with them, see how they're pronouncing things. Someone got called up I've never heard of. I will jump on YouTube. I will triple check videos of people saying their names and make sure that everyone's in concordance with the pronos. Outside of that, my spotter and I like to roam the ballpark. Citi Field's got some pretty amazing food if the press commissary is not doing it for me. And Dave, to your point, popcorn is my drug. I can't get enough popcorn. And by section 126 at Citi Field, they have Colonel is the name of it. And they pop popcorn it's crack. It's unbelievable. It's the greatest popcorn I've ever had in my life. And they sell it in this giant tub, and I can eat that entire tub. The thing is, popcorn can get stuck in your throat. The butter is coating your throat. It is creating more mucus in your throat. It's really a bad idea. But I've kind of found my way around that, or I just bring the rest home. But for me and my pronunciations, that's key. If I mispronounce something, if my voice cracks, if I stumble over copy, we'll all have a laugh over it, over a headset over it. But if I mispronounce something, my boss, formerly my friend, now my boss, he just materializes in my booth. I don't know how he does it. I don't know how quickly he gets there, or like he's just there. He's like, "What'd you just call that guy?" And I'm like, it happened one time. It was my third game, and I'll never forget it. It was Tuesday, June 4th, 2018, Baltimore Orioles afternoon game. No one was in the ballpark. I got it wrong. He called me out on it. Never again. For the Riptide, it's not as simple. It's basically the same idea, but getting the pronunciations is a lot of French Canadians. I have to turn to the other team, or I rely on our our in-game producer Jen to find out for me the pronunciations, and or I'll just go up to the players, myself. But with that, it's a lot more freewheeling with the Riptide, because you're doing a little bit of color commentary, a little bit of play-by-play. You're doing your typical PA stuff, your reads, your ads, and then your goal calls and what have you. But it is this great amalgamation of everything I've ever done in my career, including comedy, because you can just rip on the opposing team. So I'll prepare for that based on where they're coming from. If they're coming from Philadelphia, I'll make jokes about, brotherly love or what have you. Or like they couldn't even handle a Liberty Bell. How are they supposed to handle a lacrosse ball? Like stupid stuff like that. Yeah. But that's how I prep. And if I've done my job correctly by the end of it, my voice is tired, gargle with salt water, gargle with slippery elm, call it a day, reboot, reset, and go again.
I'm always fascinated with public address announcers.
I just want to interject real quick. Colin, I don't know if you're or not, buddy.
What's that?
You're cracking on Philly. I just want you to know if you can make sure you can read the shirt here.
Literally, that's the only reason I went there. And I'm sorry, as a New York sports announcer and sports fan, I have to do it. But I've got nothing but love for you. And if need be, I would fight for Philly as well.
Go ahead, Dave. I'm sorry.
I like this Northeast corridor battle. Let's keep this going. That's awesome. Get some Phillies Mets stuff going on here. People can bring that up in the chat. But I'm always fascinated, and you both brought this up, and a lot of people wrote to me in all the questions upon registering for this. And thank you, everybody, for doing that, because that gears the conversation. But both of you, brought up the pronunciations, how it's important to get it right. Your bosses, your employers expect you to. But especially for people on here, guys, before I turn it over to questions, at maybe the lower level, just starting, it's high school, minor league baseball at the lower level, so low A, high A, double A, independent ball, college, small college. What do you do in the case where, you get a name right before first pitch, kickoff, what have you, and you don't know, what it is? And do you go up to people? And I think some people sometimes are often, afraid and shy. They don't, because they don't know who you are. But if you guys can tell us and share that, and I know you already kind of have in a way, but if you go into a little more detail, who you might want to talk to, if you're at the lower levels where there might not be a media relations or SID, is it just simply going into the dugout and asking real quick before the broadcast starts? Go ahead, Kevin.
So Dave, I have such an appreciation for having, when you work at that minor league baseball level, the high school level, 110% of what you have to do is all on you, right? You've got to do everything yourself to get all of the information that you need. And so in minor league baseball, the tricks that I found, who the person that is the best to ask prior to the game is usually the athletic trainers for the teams. And that's sometimes on the collegiate level, because they're the ones who aren't necessarily actively involved in preparing for whatever game you're doing. So they're just waiting for people to get hurt, right? And God forbid that never happens. But so they're more or less there. And you would think that, being part of the team, they know everybody's name. So I would usually try to go and seek them out. I'm going to seek them out, right? Because you don't want to be shy in that situation, because guess what? When you say the name wrong, that individual is not going to be shy about telling you, hey, you got my name wrong. And you don't want to project that. You want to have a level of professionalism, because in the end of the day, what it really comes down to, Dave, is whatever organization you're working for, you want them to have trust in you. And it's trust that you are going to handle and manage this game situation in a most professional way, regardless of what happens, right? And I think as you work your way up the levels, that's really what sort of separates you, is the ability to say, I've got this. Whatever happens, you can trust me. We've had times at Subaru Park where we've had weather delays. We've had to cancel matches. At Campbell's Field, when I used to announce the old River Sharks games, we've had to cancel fireworks for very unusual circumstances. I'll say we had the Ben Franklin Bridge right there, and some individuals wanted to use Ben Franklin Bridge for reasons that you don't want them to use it for. And so we've had to cancel things, right? And so when those sort of scenarios come about, it's that ability to say, I'm going to convey this message in a way that sounds like I have it written down, even if I don't. And so to your point, when you're working at the minor league baseball, that's where I would say be brash, go and get the right information. There's not going to, sometimes there's going to be the opportunity, you're not going to have that opportunity. There are going to be times where you just sort of have to go and push forward. And that's where that level of confidence comes into play, right? Make a decision on how you think it sounds, say it that way confidently, and then we can go back and switch it if we need to, right? But it's that level of confidence, I think that needs to be dealt with. So yeah, I think in summary, it's the athletic trainer sometimes who can be the person with the most information that you may need when nobody else is around. So hope that helps.
Yeah, no, it does. I like the athletic trainer tip. And I don't know if Colin will agree with this, or Colin, when you did this, when you were doing play-by-play games with MSG Varsity or Verizon Fios, it's simply also, if you have the opportunity, like in a basketball game, it's easier. You can go up to the player while they're warming up. Some are receptive, some might not be, but you tell them. I saw somebody in the chat say, explain who you are professionally, what you're doing for that game. This is why I think, you should be telling me your name correctly. Colin, what's your take on getting the names right, and how about doing it in a professional manner?
Well, for high school sports level, you immediately have access to the players, the coaches, and their staff. I mean, you just walk up to them and you say, listen, I'm going to be doing the play-by-play or the color or the sideline reporting for your game today. I want to make sure that when you go back and you watch this game, I do not butcher your name, because you're going to be watching with your family on the high school level. So it's a lot easier that way. And it's funny, some of the coaches, especially with football, will be like, God, I don't even know how you pronounce that kid's name.
Yes,
like they don't even know.
A lot. You're right.
So I'll go up to them and I'll be like, 56 linebacker, like, how do you say your last name? Because you've got there's an apostrophe, there's a hyphen, like you've got the alphabet in, there's a couple of numbers, like what happened? And then I'll get that from them. With baseball, obviously, as I said, you turn to the radio booth. I'm up on the 5th level, so I'm not going to be able to go down there and access the players. And of course, security is what it is. The players, they're pros. They're not going to be the most approachable people anyway, especially right before a game. My last resort is always, I hate to say it, but it really works. Google. If you're able to find out where they're from and that specific dialect, and then you just Google, how do you say, the spelling would be, Eugenio Suarez, but he's from wherever he's from, and Venezuela, and how is that dialect? It's Eugenio Suarez. Oh, okay. So now it's like this polysyllabic nightmare that I couldn't handle my first season for some reason. That was like my worst nightmare. But that's the way I would go through it. Do a little bit of research. Just take a look at where the player's from, figure out the dialect, Google it up, and they've got those little things where the little robot voice will say it for you in its proper pronunciation. That is an absolute last resort. But I've had it at times where there was a switch in the opening pitch or the ceremonial first pitch, and the person had just a cluster of a name that was impossible to pronounce, and we were waiting on that, but they switched them around, and now that person's coming right up. Literally, I would have in my headset, have them say it to me, please welcome, and then they'd say it, and I'd take that one little beat and then just pray, and just, again, as Kevin said, go with it confidently. If you get it right, you get it right. It's not your fault you're getting it last minute, but I'll do everything in my power to make sure that I get those phonetic pronunciations at least written down or correct beforehand.
Another great tip about Googling, full transparency. I've used YouTube for play-by-play, especially if you go to a different league, like it was our first year with the New York Riptide, and hearing some guys, and if there's not a ton of broadcasts out there, and if you just Google their backstory, where they're from, and maybe there's a story on the news, and sometimes you have to roll with that. If you hear it once or twice over and over, the player may say his or her name. That's a great piece of advice. So I'm going to stop myself there as promised, and I'm going to turn it over to folks that are waiting. Again, if you're waiting, please be patient. At this time, if you haven't done so, raise your hand in the chat. Just kindly wait till I call on you. I'm going not necessarily in order, but for folks that weren't on previous Zooms that are back in, if you see yourself at the top and I'm not calling on you, it's because there's others that weren't able to ask a question on a previous Zoom. So I thank you for your patience and understanding, and I promise these guys are cool with it. We're going to get to as many of you as we can today, if not all of you. So thank you for that. Let's start with Matt Nissenfeld. Matt, tell us first where you're calling from, who your question's directed to, hopefully both guys, and we'll say hello to you. Hey, Matt.
Hey, Dave. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. So my name is Matt. I was the former announcer for Widener for several sports. And first of all, hope Kevin and Colin, you guys are doing well. I appreciate your time on here. Kevin, I remember meeting you in 2015 with the small Widener group and getting to talk to you about the kicks and the union and everything. And if it wasn't for your great advice, I certainly wouldn't have been the PA announcer for Widener baseball and soccer that I was. So I thank you for that. Now, this question could go towards both of you, but Colin, you mentioned that, you used to bring humor to your broadcasts, and me and my partner would sometimes do that for Widener basketball. But in my opinion, some of them, seemed out of place. Some of them were clever. How do you find that, happy medium to a nice, appropriate joke that, people feel that it's not completely out of place?
That's a great question because, as you do with stand-up comedy, it's an age-old adage, read the room. You've got to read where you're at in the game. If there's a lull in the action and you're able to crack a joke, as long as it's not a personal, like an inside joke, because then you're losing the audience, something that the crowd can relate to, that's your time to do it. And of course, when there's drama, you hype it up, you go nuts, you raise your voice, your intensity level. Same exact thing. If there's drama building, you will do that with your voice and your broadcast. And if there's a lull in the action, or if the game is lopsided or something, now's the time to crack jokes. You don't want to go off the rails and turn it into a straight up comedy show. Like I broadcast, this can sound strange to people, but I broadcast professional darts. And there's the championship dart circuit is a North American tour of professional darts. And the top two players go over to England to play in the World Championship representing the United States. And I'm their lead broadcaster. And they've turned it into a virtual tour, kind of a virtual league now, because the first couple of tour stops have been canceled. Well, because of that, I'm able to interact with because it's done on YouTube and on a Facebook stream. I can interact with the comments. So I can goof off with the people a little bit and have fun with it. But last night during the match, someone threw a perfect 9-darter, which is the best you can do. That's the no-hitter of darts, the perfect game. And so I went absolutely ballistic, and then, started cracking jokes again right after that. So again, it's about reading the room and just knowing when to be dramatic and when to inject some humor.
Yeah. Hey, Matt, I remember meeting you too. Yeah. So that Widener group coming through. Yeah. It's nice to have a Hey, what I always say in the public address announcing world, and it's not so much from interjecting humor, for me, it's that level of tone. I'm a guy who likes to get excited. So my calls, when I make calls, because I'm in the soccer world, right, where there are the opportunity to make the calls not regular, right? They're few and far between. So I will get over the top excited. But the phrase that I've always lived by when doing that is I want to facilitate the show. I don't want to be the show, right? So that's a fine line to sort of, my experience in 15 years, Colin, with the lacrosse is about as close as we get to that fine line of in the lacrosse world, because they wanted so much from us to interject, and I always thought it was a little bit too much, right? Like while the play is going on, let's let the play. They wanted us constantly, so it's a fine line. So that's one thing, Matt, to sort of think about as you're going through this. You want to facilitate the show, be the show. And to Colin's point, it's really about reading that room. So that's something to think about as well. Thanks for
and to that point, yeah, I mean, really the only place where you can let loose and just be a total jackass is in National Lacrosse League.
Yeah.
And I started, once I got comfortable with it, I mean, my bosses told me after the first couple of games, I thought I was pushing the envelope. They're like, no, we will tell you when you're pushing the envelope. They're like, go nuts. Just don't curse. Don't get, political or racist, and you'll be just fine. And I'm like, Well, those are some very, I mean, like that leaves a lot of wiggle room to like go to town. We'll tell you if we need to scale it back.
Yeah.
And then when I finally started feeling like I got into that and I was, just ripping on players who were like sitting in the penalty box 3 feet away from me, who could absolutely decapitate me with a lacrosse stick. Then I turned to the referees. I'm like, so compared to other PA announcers in the NLL, how am I doing? They're like, oh, you're tame. The guy up in Buffalo was brutal. The guy in Colorado incited a riot on the turf. Like, you're fine. And I'm like, well, this is some bold, and I'm like, all right, fine. I'm going to step it up even further. But with the NLL, you can go nuts. You can go absolutely ballistic.
And Colin, I think it's a different NLL now than when I was doing it, in that I think they were quicker. There were times when I was doing Wings games where I looked at the scoreboard operator and I was like, there's literally nobody who's in control right now, because there's 10 guys who were just throwing down. And towards the end of my time with the Wings, they didn't fight as much. But you're right. We had a guy that played for the Wings named Jeff Snyder, and I'm pretty sure he was clinically insane. And he was sort of the goon enforcer, and he fought with a guy, and the guy sort of turtled on him, which is obviously the biggest no-no, right? And so he comes into the penalty box, and he's leaning on me the entire time, leaning over me, sweat pouring on me, and he's yelling at the other guy. And at the end, he goes to the other guy, "I'm going to kill you." I looked at the scoreboard. I think he's serious. I think he might actually try and kill this guy. We might actually, So yeah, it was like the Wild West of doing lacrosse games, man.
I figured, I was like, actually, the one time I was chastised was in one of the last matches. It was at the end of February. And at this point, when no one really knew what was happening with coronavirus and COVID. And so I always did a thing where I would do the Riptide introductions, and we do, the full roster, and it's, rah, rah, sis, boom, bah, fireworks and smoke and, blah, blah, blah. And then I would say something, really snide and flippant about the opposing team. And I think it was the Georgia Swarm. I said, and because they made the trip and apparently have not been infected by COVID-19, here's the Georgia Swarm. Then my bosses got on the headset and they're like, let's not make any pandemic jokes again. We want to keep people comfortable. And I was just like, just pushing the envelope. Yeah, in hindsight, I'm like, yeah, that was a good call on their part.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt, for your question. Continued health and happiness to you and your family.
Thank you as well, Dave.
All right, thanks, Matt. Let's go to Mark Ernay. We got a Philly guy. Now we'll go to the New York side. Hello, Mark.
Love the balance, Dave. Love the balance.
Trying, man. Trying, man.
And go New York, go. For both guys, if you don't mind, we've had this chat going about impossible names to pronounce. And I mentioned, Dave, you would probably agree with me that tennis, especially at a Grand Slam, among the most difficult on the planet. But for both Colin and Kevin, anybody stand out as the most difficult name you've ever had to navigate?
Hey, Mark, thanks for that question. I'm going to take this one first, Colin, if that's all right, because for me, give me syllables and give me lots of vowels, but don't give me a one-syllable name. Mark, we had a guy who played for the Union. His name was Fred. He was Brazilian. He went by Fred. What am I supposed to do with Fred? I mean, how do you make that? I would sit around like, Fred. Like, what do you do with Fred? So for me, Mark, it wasn't so much. It was the fact that the guy only had one syllable in his name, and it was the most boring, name of all time. So that was probably, for me, the most difficult, was that just trying to make that name exciting, because the multi-syllable vowel, once you know how to say it, those are the ones that are a lot of fun to say. You can have Alejandro Bedoya, you can have a lot of fun with, again, ending in vowels. Jamiro Montero, give me those names all day, but don't give me Fred. Go ahead, Colin.
I kind of showed my hand earlier. For me, for no reason whatsoever, it was Eugenio Suarez. Just because reading it was Eugenio Suarez, and it just, my mind wanted to stay there. And then the phonetic, cheat sheet from Major League Baseball had it as A-Y-E, which would be Eugenio Suarez. And then, like, you check it on TV and it's Eugenio Suarez. And so, like, for some reason, that one gave me fits. But the one that I screwed up was Eric Pickard from the, or Rickard rather, from the Baltimore Orioles. And a dear friend of mine is the PA announcer for the Baltimore Orioles. Ironically, he got the job 5 years before I got this. We both wanted to work in sports, and now we're two of the PA announcers in Major League Baseball. Just a funny little caveat. But he sent me the phonetics. I was just asking him for some help, and I misread the way he spelled it. I think he capitalized something. So I called him Ricard, like he was Jean-Luc Picard. And that is when Joe DeVito materialized in my booth and said, "What'd you just call that man?" And I was just like, "But look, my friend said," he goes, no, look at this. And it's just like, Rickard. I'm like, okay.
Thanks for the question, Mark. Really appreciate that. That's awesome. Let's go to Matt Nelson. Matt, PA voice, part of the Brotherhood with the Harlem Globetrotters. Hello, Matt.
Hey, Dave. Thanks for having me on. I didn't think we would actually start this questionnaire by goofing about professional lacrosse games. That was clearly unexpected. So my question, because I feel like nowadays a lot of high profile teams, whether it's NBA, NHL, NFL, what have you, I feel like nowadays when they have openings for PA announcers, they're conducting a lot of auditions either over the phone, they're asking people to send in recordings, and they'll choose from the best however many they want, or they'll have an open call. What would be the best advice you would give to people who are trying to interview or audition for a high-profile gig in one of the big four sports?
Colin, why don't you take that one first?
Brutal. I was about to ask you to take that one. I don't know because, with any interview, in any level of any job, the number one thing that is very difficult to do is be yourself, because you want to impress you, and you automatically, unless you're a seasoned veteran, you automatically turn into this ideological form of yourself, like what you wish to be for this person, and it's not the real you, it's forced. And with any interview, as long as you're just be as relaxed as you can. Treat it like, oh well, if I get it, I get it. If I don't, I don't. Instead of being like, I must get this. Like then you're putting the pressure on yourself. Then your brain's gonna tighten up. It's not gonna be more freewheeling. The same thing's gonna happen to your throat, your voice, and just just relax. Take a deep breath. If you're an announcer and you've been doing this long enough, whether it's the high school level, college, minor leagues, majors, whatever the case may be. I mean, my first PA gig technically was going to homecoming at my high school and announcing the football games. And if I were to go into an interview at age 20, after having that as my experience, I would have forced it. And with the Mets, and it wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have been authentic. Just be you. Just take a deep breath. You got the voice, you got the talent. It's gotten to where you are so far. Why not see where it goes next?
Yeah, and to follow up on that, Matt, too. By the way, your beard looks fantastic, Matt.
Really does. Yeah, it really does look stellar.
Thank you. I haven't shaved since the end of March. I don't think I've had a beard this long. So
that looks good. Keep it.
Who knows? Whenever the Globetrotters resume, I might as well go back and see what people think about it. I may get a good reaction.
Yeah.
I say you go full Kevin Casey. Like, don't stop now, Matt.
Yeah, I said I'm full like Tom Hanks in Castaway right now. There's no return right now. So Matt, really, and to follow up on what Colin was saying too, you want to project a level of composure and confidence when you're in these interviews, because you don't want to come off as nervous and tight, because then that person's going to say, well, if he's tight now, is he going to be nervous and tight when it comes time to call these games, right? So there is definitely a level of confidence and composure you want to have. It's difficult when you're getting thrown into an open casting call, because, the one thing you're always asking, is it truly an open casting call, or is this a publicity thing? And they've sort of got, a handful of names. I've been in a couple of those scenarios. But if you're doing something where you have to record it, you obviously want to put your best stuff forward, right? Because you don't want to have a 3-minute demo and your best stuff's at 2:59, right? Because honestly, you might only get 20, 30 seconds of the 3-minute video or 1-minute video, whatever it is. So whatever's your best stuff, throw that out there and show them what is unique about you, show them what separates you from the crowd and why they might want to do that right away, right from the get-go, because it is difficult, when you're in-person auditioning, your personality, can have a better chance to shine. But sometimes when you have to do those recordings, and sometimes it's not necessarily what talent you have, it's just they might be looking for something different, I had a voiceover gig one time where I auditioned for it, and they're like, man, that was awesome. Now, if we can just get a woman to do it like that, because they wanted a woman's voice. And sure enough, I didn't get a call. So they must have found a woman to do that, right? So it's sometimes it's just what that particular team is looking for, right? So, but don't stop throwing your hat in the ring, man. Throw your hat in every ring possible.
To follow up on a question regarding a live audition, because I once interviewed for the audition for the Brooklyn Nets when they had an opening. I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, and there were about 400 or 500 people that auditioned, and of course I was one of the many people that had to wait a while. For that kind of audition process for both Kevin and Colin, is there like something you would do to kind of get yourself mentally prepared so that when you're ready, you can give all you have?
I had to once they narrowed it down. I mean, my demo got tossed in with about 300 other demos for the Mets, and it got whittled down, and then they narrowed it down to 7 of us who they brought in blocks on this Thursday, May of 2018, and my block was at 10:30 in the morning, and this way they would bring us into the press room, and then bring us upstairs for just a quick briefing on what was about to happen, then into the booth, read roster, some copy, and then out. So it kind of circled around so no one saw each other. When I was sitting there and I was going through my copy, I was just in my mind saying each name and kind of like whispering it too. So I'm not shouting out names all alone in a room and looking like a madman. As I was walking down that hallway to what is now my PA booth, but walking into that PA booth for the first time, it was just a deep breath, and it's just like, just get the names out there, give it your voice, don't force it. It was just what if I got to lose? And at that point, I'm 38 years old, so it's a little bit easier to do that than when you're younger. For me, it was just like, you know what? I made it this far. What the hell? Have that what the hell mentality, but don't let that drive you into just being complacent and kind of like stagnant. But have this like, what the hell? If I get it, I do. If not, and then it's showtime. Just do what I do every time I talk into a microphone. So that'd be my advice. Just shut out whatever's in front of you and just imagine it's you in your bedroom with your Yeti or your Blue or your Audio Technica, and you're just doing your thing, and just have at it.
Yeah, and for me, Matt, I've always taken on the persona of the grinder, right? The movie Rounders, there's the one guy who just sort of grinds it out. And I've kept my head down, and like Dave said, I've taken every PA job I could, and I've just grinded and grinded and grinded. And what happens is that builds confidence. So as you're going into these other auditions and these other interviews, you have all of that wealth of experience, right? And that just sort of helps prepare you and gives you a sense of confidence, right? So I think that's part of it too, is just that grinding and doing everything you can to hone your craft, and any opportunity that is given to you to do it will only benefit you more as you're going into these auditions and interviews. And I know you're a guy with a pretty diverse background, and you're doing a lot of different sports too. So that's only going to serve you well, going forward, Matt.
Thank you. Not to mention I did 260 games last year alone. So Gentlemen, thank you for being on board.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Really appreciate it. Continued success to you guys, to you and your family as well. Let's go to Brandon Ross. Brandon's joining us today. Hey, Brandon, tell us where you're calling from.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for doing this. I'm from Westchester County, New York, also a King School alum. Hi, Colin. Good to see you again. I'm someone who's more of a play-by-play guy. I haven't done much on the PA side. Obviously, ad-libbing's a big part of it. So when it comes to that portion of the job, how do you gauge when you're talking too much versus too little?
So go ahead, Colin. I answered the last one. Go ahead.
Oh, no. I just go for it.
Well, I would say actually that most of what we do as PA announcers is scripted. So there is not as much of an opportunity for us to ad lib, but sometimes those opportunities do present themselves. And I'll go back to lacrosse again. When I was doing Wings games, we would get through the entire script ready to announce the Wings starting team or just their team roster, and I would hear in my ear, "They're not ready yet. You have to stall." And so I would start this whole sort of speech about, with just building up the lather, I guess, if you will, in the seating area. So you just sort of, within that ad-libbing, you're really kind of just doing it to fill the time and space, right? Now, there are times when I've got to read some PAs that obviously you can't prepare for everything, right? So, again, that's where it's just that ability to have confidence in what you're saying. And just say that. But I think play-by-play guys, man, you guys have a far greater, more difficult job than I think we do as PA announcers, right? And Colin, you can probably speak to that because you have some play-by-play experience. But I always say that if I can read off a script, a third grade reading level, is a pretty good job security for a PA announcer because we just have to read so much. But play-by-play guys, you have it really tough. So go ahead, Colin.
Brandon, good to do, and yes, go Vikings, fellow King alum. Play-by-play, it varies by sport. I mean, when you're doing soccer, you can let it breathe. You have that luxury. When you're doing hockey, that's not going to happen, especially once you get up to the higher levels. For instance, I was doing the play-by-play for the New Jersey high school championships, and once you get into the non-public, you get your Del Bartons and your Don Bosco preps. And these guys are basically like D1 JV. And they are fast and there's nonstop. And that's why my broadcasting idol is Doc Emmerich. He may be very polarizing to people and, that voice might get you, but holy hell, that man is able to paint a picture in a way that is, you would have thought he's already seen the game and you would think it was scripted, and it's just genius. But then that also tends, that goes to radio as well. Hockey for radio, you're painting a picture and you're going at that rapid rate. Lacrosse, you'll have a little bit of downtime and then you'll have like this frenetic pace around the net. So it all depends on the sport. With baseball, I envy baseball, or don't envy baseball play-by-play guys the most, because they have to have constant stories and filler material because there is so much downtime between pitches and innings and so on. So it literally it comes down to what the sport is, and also who your director is. I remember I was calling a basketball game and my director was just like, "Colin, it's not a hockey game." I'm like, "Yeah, but the game is boring as hell." And he was just like, "Well, stop." And I'm like, "Fine, let them fall asleep." But he's the director, and we would rib each other all the time. Also, words to the wise: always be friends with whoever's in the booth with you, but your number one friend should always be the crew, your camera crew, replay guys, director, everyone that's in the truck. Those are your best friends. Those are the ones that make you sound and look good, and also they're the ones that tend to be a lot more entertaining.
I love it. Thanks for the question, Brandon. Thanks, guys, for answering that. Brandon, thanks for joining us today. Let's go to Keith Chambers. I think Keith's new to the Zooms. Keith, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, guys. I wanted to thank Kevin and Colin for taking time out of their afternoon to help share their craft. It's late morning here on the West Coast. I'm in Washington State. My local teams are the Seattle Sounders and the Seattle Mariners. I actually have a question for Kevin and a question for Colin. Dave, if that's okay.
Yeah, roll with it. Go ahead, please, Keith.
Perfect. All right. First for Kevin, I wanted to ask your thoughts on this upcoming MLS season, because one of the big PA announcer gimmicks is call and response. I know that the Sounders PA, James Woolard, he does call and response for every Seattle Sounders home player and goal. So I want to kind of get your thoughts on the pluses and minuses of that, and if you do it, and how you're preparing yourself to PA announce in front of an empty stadium. Hopefully it doesn't get like that, but that seems to be the way that things are going.
Yeah, great question, Keith. And James and I have actually developed a friendship by talking to each other through Twitter. And so I've had a chance to really sort of bounce some ideas. And so, yeah, call and response is big in Seattle. So if you've ever YouTube, you see some of the there's a team in Germany that's big into it. Juventus in Italy, Serie A does it. And it really is a cool sound when it's done with a full stadium, which Seattle does get those full stadiums. So I think it's a tradition that is unique to those places. I think if too many stadiums tried to do it, it would not appear as unique and sort of like you were just kind of trying to copy off the guy to your left, right? So I don't know how many. I know there's a couple MLS guys that are on board here. I know at the Union we do not use call and response. But I know that some stadiums do, and I think it works more effectively in the bigger stadiums. Yeah, I mean, it's a great sort of a unique way to call a goal and interact and involve the fan base as well. It can go bad, I guess, if you're not getting that response back, and that's where I've always wondered how like that develops, right? Like, how do you start to decide, hey, we're going to do call and response now, So at some point, somebody's got to tell somebody else what they're doing, right? So I've always wondered about that. The hope is that we're going to be getting back to MLS matches here. And you're right. So like I said earlier, man, I'm almost more juiced to I have more of a mission, if you will, to do my craft in an empty stadium, because like I said, I want the entire Delaware Valley region to hear it, and let them know that they're incorporated into it. So, I'm fired up to be able to have that opportunity. So thanks for the question, Keith. Hope I answered it.
And Kevin,
Awesome.
just to piggyback off that real quick, for call and response, you talked about the development of it. In the inaugural season of the New York Riptide, we started developing what are going to be our chants, moving forward, because we're starting with a clean slate. What we do now is going to carry on for the duration of the organization. So we started doing something where, if someone gets in the box, it's kind of this call and response thing, where I'll say, like penalty, Georgia Swarm, and he's got to, and then let it, that's supposed to lead the crowd into chanting, "Get in the box, woo!" And we started building it, and we kind of like we're training them, the crowd, in the beginning of games, and they started to catch on to it. So I just wanted to interject there, because I never knew how that worked until this happened, and now it's the season got cut short, so I don't know if they're going to remember in the fall. We'll have to reacclimate them, but that's how it all started.
And my question for Colin, first of all, Colin, thank you for the wonderful story about your grandfather. He was one generation behind me, but I've seen so many of his calls and what made him famous. So to be speaking to someone who's directly related to him is pretty cool, man.
Well, thank you,
Pretty
Keith.
cool.
I'm the lesser Cosell. That's my Instagram, is the other Cosell, because my cousin Greg does stuff for ESPN, and he's better than I am. So I'm the other Cosell. But thank you. That means a lot. Thank you. You just brightened my day.
Awesome. So my question, I do sports at high school and junior college level, and that's a lot more open and accessible. Like everyone's sort of on the same level in the same building. If if you make a mistake, someone's going to walk up to you and tell you that you're making a mistake. What's the best way that you found out to sort of control the flow of that? Like, if you have an angry parent walk up to you, they're not going to care if your microphone's on or off or what you're thinking about. So how did you come up with controlling direct feedback from people not associated with the club that you're working with?
I learned it pretty early. It's a great question. As I mentioned before, my first real kind of PA gig was coming back to my high school homecoming, coming home from college. And, I'm in my late teens, early 20s, and I was just a huge smartass. So the refs, I remember my first year doing it, the refs were throwing flags on like every single play. And it got to the point where I was making fun of the refs, and it got to the point where the refs were listening. And then it got to the point where the refs threatened to penalize the team even more if I kept ripping on the refs. So then, I continued doing what I do. And this is what I do with the Mets as well. I give oomph. I give an energy to the Mets and the Mets names that I will not give to the opposing team because, well, they're our home team, and I'm cheering for them as well. I want to boost them and let the opposition know that they're the enemy. Well, I was doing that at the high school level, and it turned out that they set me up with my microphone right in the opposing team's section of the bleachers. So, I'd be like, touchdown for Brunswick, blah, 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 blah. And this woman gets up and she berates me. She goes, "Why won't you say my son's name with some excitement? He scored a touchdown. He's playing too." And I turned to her, and I'm like 20 years old, had no right talking to an adult this way. And I was like, "Look, lady, he doesn't play for King. I don't care about your son." And then her dad stands up, and he was just like, "Don't you talk." And I was just like, "Excuse me, first down on the blood." And I was like, just tried to continue on with my life. It got pretty ugly. I was not invited back for 2 years after that. I did not do homecoming, and then then everyone's gone, so it's okay to have me back. With the Mets, it's actually funny. I've had fans come up and say, like, "Why do you sound like you're attending a funeral when you're announcing the St. Louis Cardinals coming up to bat?" I'm like, because it basically is. Like, I don't want to see these guys. I don't want to bring them up to bat, but I have to. Finally, my boss actually middle last season, he's just like, instead of getting into this lower register that doesn't really sound like you at all, he's just like, "Can you just kind of deadpan it and be like, I'll bring it back to him and be like, the third baseman, Eugenio Suarez," instead of being like, "the third baseman," like just sounding like death. But, if people are going to call you out on it, just be like, "Look, I'm here for the home team. I'm here for the home school," or whatever it is. And just be unabashedly unapologetic. Like, if you want me to say your kid's name emphatically, here's my day rate. I will come to your school, give me a microphone, and I'll cheer for them. I'll bring them on. Sure, whatever you want. But until then, the hell off my property, lady.
Oh,
Don't
man. Oh, man. I have been so tempted to do that. I actually did a couple of youth football games, and those youth football parents are probably the worst.
Oh, yeah. I mean, no, actually, second to hockey. Hockey parents are out of control. Although Little League parents too. Actually, you know what? Parents are crazy.
I know.
Dave, you're a new father. Don't let that happen to you.
I'm trying not to. I'm learning early. I would say, if I can just put my 2 cents in this, Keith. Now, thanks for the question, Keith. And I think you got to handle it. And I assume you do it this way. And I know Kevin and Colin would, and probably everybody on here, is you got to just be professional. You say to someone, this is the way I'm told to do it. This is where my paycheck's coming from. And this is the job I have in front of me. I know not everybody's going to like it, but that's it. Or you simply say, "Man, I'm in the middle of my broadcast. I'm in the middle of my PA. If you want to talk after the game, I'm happy to stand there and talk with you." And sometimes, you got to take it, let them, it's like my days, like you're being an umpire too. When I've done that on the side is, you let the coaches go at it for you for a little bit. And then, they say, "Did you say your piece?" And then you move on. So I know it's hard to take, and not everybody, I think we've talked about this many times on other Zooms as well. The business is so subjective, and not everybody's going to love my announcing, your announcing, whoever. But if we do the job right by our employers and by the majority of the fan base, I think we'll attest to the longevity in your job. So that is a tough case to handle. Thank you for the question. Let's go to Cameron Seibert. Cameron, welcome.
Hey, Dave, thanks. Just wanted to definitely start by saying I appreciate you guys taking the time to do this. I'm out in Sandwich, Massachusetts on the Cape Cod. I go to UMass Amherst. I'm going to be a senior this year. I was just promoted to be the sports director of our student radio station, so exciting stuff on the horizon for me. I was a play-by-play announcer last year for the basketball team. But yeah, I've done a little bit of public address announcing. I definitely have a lot of respect for it. My question is a little more specific. It was kind of a follow-up question to what Dave asked earlier about when the stadiums are going to be empty and you guys are still doing public address announcing. With the players, do you feel like there's kind of an importance there, almost a responsibility for you guys to kind of create that atmosphere because they're going to be also experiencing this for the first time, playing in a stadium alone? And then kind of on the same foot, what is the relationship between you and the players, if there is one at all?
So I will tell you this, Cameron. So, and this is actually a lesson that was learned when I was doing minor league baseball, because a lot of times you play those minor league baseball games in August and September and they're empty stadiums. There's not a lot of people, right? Because it's group driven. And so it was always told to me that every night is somebody's first night at whatever stadium you're working in, right? And so to be professional, you operate under those conditions. And so if you're giving me a microphone and I'm in my living room and I'm the only one there, I'm going to operate in the same fashion as I would if I was in front of 80,000 people, because that's the job as a professional, right? So I think if I'm in an empty stadium, that's the sort of mentality, right? Every night is somebody's first night. And so you just sort of progress under that same conditions and things. As far as relationships with the players, not so much. We just don't sort of cross paths. Play-by-play guys, color guys might get a chance to interact as far as interviewing and things like that. I go right up to the press area and leave right from there, so I don't see the guys as much. I don't have as much of a need as a play-by-play guy does to sort of build relationships and get those stories that you could use in your broadcast. So from my standpoint, not so much of a relationship with the guys. You cross paths with them in certain events and things like that. And it's funny because you'll get the comments where, you always wonder if the guys are listening, and they'll make a comment or something that lets you know that they like the way you say their name, or, it kind of gets them fired up, and that kind of puts it a little bit of a cherry on top for you. But yeah, go ahead, Colin.
First of all, Cameron, I can tell you're going to have one hell of a career because you've got a fantastic voice already. That thing is only going to get deeper and more verbose. So, and congratulations on the new position. For me, I don't really, on the professional level with baseball, I mean, we are so separated from each other. Like in the production aspects for the Mets, like our production offices are on the exact opposite side of the stadium for where the executive offices are. So there's like 400 people I've never seen in my life who are allegedly my coworkers at Citi Field because they're over in the executive offices. Over in the production side, there's, a dozen of us, and we all know each other very, very well. Yeah, about a dozen to 20 of us, and we know each other very, very well, and it's tight knit. But then again, we're also 5 stories up above the ballpark, and so the interactions with the players are very limited. Which is, it's fine. Like I love my little booth and the people that I'm interacting with. And I also don't want to interfere, with the players at all. I will keep an eye on if there's something that we have produced, or there's a funny bit of copy that just happens to be funny, or, one time, getting on at that point, if there's something on City Vision that we put up there and see if the players are watching, we all feed off of that. We're like, oh, the players are watching that. Oh, they're laughing. They're ribbing on each other. Like they got a kick out of that thing we produced. But there was one time during a massive thunderstorm that came in last season, and there was like torrential downpour and like cloud ground lightning, and it was not safe. And everyone was just kind of leisurely leaving their seats. I mean, they were bringing the tarp out and everything. They're just leisurely going up. And I just made an announcement severe weather, and I read the copy as, severe weather is entering the area. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay covered. Go in anywhere, like that's covered, so on and so forth. People not leaving. And then my director said, Colin, can you tell them again and just like put a little oomph on it? I was like, no, seriously, folks, there's a chance you could die. It is dangerous. Please get some cover. And some of the players were sitting there. They looked up and started laughing. And they're like, yeah, what was it? Dom Smith, like they got a kick out of that. And I was just like, good. So they are listening from time to time. But that was about it. But I came very close to being like, come on, you idiots. What's wrong with you? Get out. But yeah, that's my experience with it. It's much more hands-on with the Riptide, but that's because I'm a hockey guy, they're lacrosse guys, and we always kind of see eye to eye. We have that same kind of craziness. So I'll interact with them a little bit, but on the major league level, no.
We had a fireworks display scheduled for a minor league baseball game, and the Camden River Sharks are right on the Delaware River, and around the 8th inning, somebody on the other side of the river in Philly were having a fireworks show. And so I had to I ad-libbed and just on my own made the comment that, ladies and gentlemen, have your attention, please. Those are not our fireworks. Please do not look up. Do not look up. And it was funny because, you see the reaction of the players. I think, that's, makes it worthwhile, I think, a little bit too when you get that.
Thanks for the question, Cameron, and continued success at UMass. I know I did a UMass Temple game a couple seasons ago. Matt McCall's, I believe, still their coach, and he's done a great job. I know he's increased his win total, I think, for the first 3 years. So keep doing your thing. Be as versatile as you can, and knock them dead up there.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
No, you're welcome. And one thing I will say, before we get to more questions, is when it comes to, it's come up a few times on our Zooms about relationships with players. I think it's important to be professional, right? And not, if you're getting in, this is to everybody, it's not just to Cameron, just to the group. If you're in this business, for fame or to get buddy with a player or coach or to go out to dinner with all these guys, I think you're in it for the wrong reasons. And, when I go to training or, you go to the ballpark or you go to the arena, it's awesome if you have that relationship, and over time you can build up where you can walk up to a player as they're warming up and say hello and shoot the breeze, talking about things other than sports. But a lot of times, and I kind of instilled this upon myself in college, learning from others, is just be seen. People are going to respect you, even if you don't talk to everybody and you want to just stand back and observe, and you don't feel like maybe asking a question that day. That's okay. People are going to respect you that if you just show up, you're professional, you dress for the job that you want, necessarily not that old cliche, not the job you have. I think that goes a long way. And sometimes as I go on with the different teams, different towns, and I see how people interact, and I step back, and even at where I'm at, sometimes I say very little, even for an ESPN broadcast, where the analyst is asking a lot of the questions. I'm sitting there, I'm thinking like, man, should I ask a question to this coach in this meeting? But, like Kevin Harlan said, or Sean McDonough, a lot of times they let the analysts do the talking. They're really the experts, and they're, play-by-play guys doing the X's and O's. I think same thing can be said if you're a PA guy or radio host or what have you. But I think to be a great listener. So that's something just to key in on, and maybe focus on the next time when sports does come back, or whatever organization you're part of. Don't feel like you have to interject or walk up to the batting cage and crack a joke or something. Sometimes it's cool to stay back and feel everything out. I think Colin, Kevin both mentioned this. Read the room, interact with people, and see how they're interacting with each other in the control room. If you're doing a PA announcing that, or a courtside doing a basketball game, feel it out and take it from there. Just my 2 cents on that. I know the voice has been waiting, so here's Jacob Schwartz. Go ahead, Jacob. Thanks for your patience today.
Oh, Kevin Casey and Colin Cosell. Actually, I'll get to you in a minute, Mr. Cosell, but Kevin, a pleasure to talk to you as always, my friend.
You too, Jacob. Man, I've been seeing you've been busy. You've been on that phone all the time, making calls,
What is this? I'm getting rings. I just literally got off the phone with, and Dave, I got something very big to tell you. We'll talk about that tonight, but it does involve. So Kevin, I am starting. Voice of Reason, which is a very well-known podcast, has now become a live show. and I just literally got off the phone with the boss, and he has told me we're excited. Starting next Saturday, 12 to 1, 610 ESPN will broadcast a live edition of the most popular high school and college sports show in the nation. I'm very excited about it. I'm looking forward to great guests. Kevin, you are always welcome to be one of those guests. And, you know, like I said, because I've told you this 1,000 times, I admire what you do. I'm honored to have served with you at LaSalle and both Drexel. I was honored when you and I were kind of like side by side for the PA job for the Sixers about years back. I just, like I said, it's incredible what's been going on in my life. And then on top of that, when I was in business, being a 15-year public address announcer, and I feel like I kind of stepped my game up a little with using your voice as a, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This is the voice, the one and the only. And I did it because I thought, man, Kevin Casey just sounds like a professional. He is a professional.
Let it be known, I never used the one and the only, though. That's your.
You know, Kevin, it's like I said, it's pretty amazing what's been happening to me in the last 24 hours. You know, I honestly was like, literally, I'm driving along, going to get some dinner, and I'm literally like I think my mood has changed in the past 12 hours than it did, because I thought, there's just no way this is going to happen. We need sponsors for our radio show. Times are tough. You know, we're in the worst situation we've ever had in over a century. And I mean, when I just found out what I was going to be able to get, I thought, oh my God, this is incredible. It's going to happen. Like, it literally 1 week from Saturday, this show is going to I'm going to do it. I'm going to go live, and hey, The Voice is going to hopefully have Kevin Casey, Dave Leno, and the infamous Colin Cosell, hopefully, from the New York Mets. Hey, Colin, while I actually have you on, there's somebody next to me who would like to say hello to you. You want to say hi to him? Colin, this is your grandfather, Howard Cosell. What a great day we have here in Philadelphia. Oh, I'm sorry. He's not here. But you know what, Colin, I loved your grandfather. I was a big fan of his. He revolutionized everything there is about this sport. And Kevin, when I first got on the Zoom, you bring up I was lucky enough to get on the tidbits you mentioned about because there are three inspirations that I've had in this business. Four, including yourself, Dan Baker, Bobby Shepard, and of course the great Lou Nolan. And I had the privilege, actually, when I was in my part-time job of driving Uber, having his I think it was his godson's wife in the back seat of my car, and I drove her home, but we had such great conversations. In fact, Lou performed at her wedding. Lou is the biggest inspiration to those in this industry. And I feel like people like yourself and Colin, I'm sure, they've been these types of people that can carry that tradition today. There's so many people on this call that have probably done what I've done, which is, like, if I say a name and somebody will come up to me and say, Colin, I know you said you had that type of problem. Somebody said the same thing. They said, can you please say my name, my son's name, with a little bit of enthusiasm, please? You are absolutely killing me right now. This is the worst form of PA I've ever heard. I said, I'm sorry, miss. Your son's not on the team I'm getting paid for. It's, my question, and Dave, I promise I'll be quick.
Thank you.
How do I continue? Do you think that with a show like 610 ESPN, because Matt Cord's doing it now, he's Y100. You get a lot of these DJs to go on the air. It seems they can get more access to these types of jobs. Do you think that if I were to join a radio station, something like this could happen to someone like me?
Well, Jacob, I think that definitely when you're in that industry, right, you're making connections and you're making networking opportunities and avenues that will only serve you in the future. So I definitely think that's a positive. I have definitely had experiences. I'm a bit unique in that I don't think we've said this yet, but I'm a U.S. history teacher. So I've taught.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I teach U.S. history at the high school level, and I've done that for the last 22 years.
Whereabouts?
I'm in Pittman,
In Jersey.
Pittman, New Jersey, in
Oh,
South
wow.
Jersey. Yeah.
That is
So
awesome.
I think there's been examples in my career where that has, I think, hindered me because I've gone up for some jobs with individuals in the radio industry, and I think that level of career path would serve them well in that particular area, and so. I think you're doing great by just getting more opportunity to have that ability to gain experience, and I think it's only going to serve you well going forward.
Oh, I hope so. Colin, like I said, for you, I could, like I said, we could sit here all day, but it would not be fair to the other Zoom listeners. Your grandfather was such an incredible inspiration to you. I guess my question to you is that how do I get to? I've always wanted to get to Kevin and your level. How do I get there? How do I become the next voice of the major sports team?
A bit of, for me, it was a bit of luck. A lot of this industry is who you know, not what you know.
Of course.
It takes tenacity, which I can absolutely see you have. It takes networking, which I know you wouldn't be afraid to do. So I think you're on the right path. It literally it is it's a lot of networking. It literally is who you know, not what you know. Some people make it on what you know, but I'm living proof that it's it takes just some tenacity and putting yourself out there too.
I personally think you do a heck of a job. I had a chance to listen to you do a game, and then I got a chance to see you with your partner Marisol. I'm thinking I saw the jacket that you had of your late grandfather's, by the way, phenomenal, because like I said, I feel bad I impersonated him because I was such
it's
a
okay.
big fan.
I've only put up with it for 40 years of my entire life.
You can't impersonate a guy that you idolize. I mean, Chris Farley basically said it best. I never impersonated John Belushi because he was my idol. And that, to me, that could be kind of a form of disrespect. You want to show respect to your hero, and your grandfather, like I said, was that. Gentlemen, thank you again. I really appreciate it. Dave. Again, I don't want to take any of your of everybody else's time. Kevin, always great to see you. And Colin, of course, I'd love to have you on my show on Saturdays. You're always welcome.
Thank you, Jacob. And that wasn't the worst imitation I've ever heard. So keep working on it.
Colin Cosell. Double C, ladies and gentlemen, for 3. No, thank you, Dave.
All right. Thank you, Jacob, and continued success as you start this new venture on 610 ESPN in Philadelphia on the radio. Congratulations to you. Kevin and Colin, you guys doing okay? If you need a break, just give me a shout. I see 1, 2, 3. I see 6 more hands up. So let's go to Danny. Danny, come on. Danny Kutchler.
Hey, it's actually Kukor, but hey, what the hey?
Hey, that's why I'm not getting these PA jobs, Danny. That's why I leave Kevin and Colin.
Hey, we could say correction. It's actually Kukor.
There you go. Go ahead, Danny.
But I am one of these guys who actually is considering a bit of one of these journeymen in my career. Right now, I'm sort of like in a lull period in my broadcasting journey, where I am halfway done community college, and I'm sort of dissatisfied with like the way community college is structured and stuff like that. So, I want to go to broadcasting school, but don't have the money for it yet. So I want to become a certified peer specialist so I get the money to go to broadcasting school. So I don't have like the enough money to like get a broadcasting job yet. So how do I keep my name and relevance out there? Because I do podcasts, I do my radio show, and how do I keep my name out there?
Well, Danny, I think it's a great question, and I think that there was a time when I was young and starting in the career too, where I was thinking about going down a path to go to school for it. I was an education major in college, right? So I was headed down that path, and I had some great advice given to me by a guy by the name of John McAdams, who was a mentor of mine. John McAdams was the voice of the Big Five in Philadelphia, and just about called every big college basketball game in a college basketball-rich city of Philadelphia. And he encouraged me to continue on in my path with education because really so much of the opportunity within the sports world was, people aren't going to look at whether you have a piece of paper with a degree in this field. They're going to look at other things. They're going to look at how you sound, how you conduct yourself. So I guess as you're getting started, my suggestion would be to just try and find your way in whatever capacity into some of these teams, and just start getting as much experience as you can there. I started turning pages for the guy, so the PA announcer for the Philadelphia Kicks, and that was kind of where I started. And I think those opportunities are opportunities for you to network and continue to build your networking ring, and those are only going to serve you in the future.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I definitely believe that I can definitely hopefully get those jobs, and hopefully I can sort of careen my way in there.
You're right. We all weaseled our way into these jobs. Yeah, you weasel everywhere every now and then. Weaseling's not so bad sometimes.
All I did was make a damn good Bloody Mary, and now the guy's my boss. So there you go.
Yeah. So you guys were great, and I want to thank you both. And those NLL stories were fantastic. So thank you guys for both of your stories, and you guys are inspirations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. Best of luck to you, my friend.
Hey, Dave, I'm going to travel real quick because if I don't.
No problem.
So.
Go ahead. No, go do your traveling. Thanks, Danny, for that. Really appreciate it. Let's go to Scott S.D. Weiss. Scott, you've been on long and hard here, and our water polo friend. How are you, Scott?
Thanks. And speaking of water polo, I'm Scott S.D. Weiss. I'm from Conshohocken, Pennsylvania. Right now, I really should be at Arizona State University in Tempe if it weren't for the season's cancellation, as this weekend would have been the Women's National Collegiate Club Championship. I would have done announcing, graphics, and camera.
Wow.
Here's a question for public address or play-by-play. How do you handle unexpected in-game stoppages, such as equipment malfunctions and sudden injuries?
Ooh. Go ahead, Colin.
Yeah. I mean, luckily with the Mets, my first season, it felt like there was a rain delay every other game. And so that'll be a sudden stoppage. If there's equipment malfunction or something like that, you're fortunate on the professional level where there's going to be prefabbed material that you can run. It can be ads. If you've got an in-game host, you can have them go around and maybe do some trivia or something like that. From a PA perspective, if it's something that requires us addressing the crowd, be it an emergency or we appreciate your patience during this time or what have you, then so be it. But typically it's up to the director and the executive producer who's going to say, hey, we're going to run this spot now, or we're going to do this now, or hey, can you announce this? But it's entirely situational and circumstantial, and for both, it's really what the director tells me to say. I don't know what they do on your level, Kevin.
I think the biggest thing is the respect given to injuries in a game situation. Usually the unwritten rule is that you don't want to talk over an injury. And so, when there's an injury, that's when it's okay, I think, to have some of that dead air, at least for the standpoint of in arena, right? I think play-by-play obviously would be a little bit different. You want to keep talking and fill in that. But I think from an in-arena game operation standpoint, it's injuries and having it's okay. You want to play hype, real loud music when you have an injury. It's just not appropriate. You don't want to sort of do the read for or whatever sponsorship. So I think that's the big thing is that stoppage on an injury is giving that the level of respect that it deserves. And it doesn't matter which side the injury's on. Now, of course, in soccer, a lot of the times, you have an injury where you're sure the guy's going to lose his leg. And then 30 seconds later, he's making that full field sprint to get the game-winning goal. So, but again, yeah, you want to make sure you have that.
Yeah, I think that's universal with injuries. PA, if you're a play-by-play, if it's a really bad injury, chances are good they're going to go to commercial. But yeah, PA-wise, absolutely. Let it go completely silent.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Colin. And to all the ladies out there who are mothers, have a happy and safe Mother's Day.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Scott. I'm not a mother yet, but working on it.
Yeah, I'm trying, right? Thanks, Scott. Really appreciate that. And that is a tough part during a broadcast. And we've heard this a lot from many of the broadcasters we've had on as guests. Less is more. Reading the situation, I think, Kevin, you make a great point. And Colin, you too, with injuries, not the time to bring in a sponsor read. And, sometimes a producer may not be able to, see everything that's going on, and they might be calling for something. And it's your job as if you're in an announcer position, hit them with the talkback button if you have one, or turn off your mic and say to somebody in the room, now's not the time to do it. And here's why, if you can. Sometimes that's occurred to me on many different levels, and it's okay for the betterment of the organization and for your production to say that at times. Here's Omid. Omid is a first-time Zoomer with us. Hey, Omid, thanks for coming on.
Hey, Dave, Colin, and Kevin. Thank you guys so much for taking the time out of your day to do this. So. Couple of questions. First question is, when these different sports teams and whatever say send in a demo, what exactly do I send? Because I'm not sure they want to hear my scratchy voice over some like arena speakers, and like some of them want like the more like in-game feel. Second question is, you guys have obviously reached a very professional level, and I want to know what kind of separated you guys from the pack, because I'm sure that there were things that you guys were doing at an amateur level that were different and that made you the people that you are today and able to be so successful.
Wow, great question. What separates us, Colin? That's
You know what? It's really funny. I don't know, because I pinch myself every time I go into the booth, because I'm like, am I really is my voice really good enough to be filling up a major league ballpark or a professional arena? Like, I don't, once I start talking into the mic, I go in with full confidence, but I've heard Kevin Casey's calls. I've heard the PA announcers and for the Colorado Rockies, as just the greatest, like, silky smooth bassiest voice. And it's just like, it's sexy. I'll just say it. I mean, I'll just put it out there. And I'm like, now that's a great voice. And I'm like, mine's not that good. So I don't know. I feel lucky that I have all the jobs that I have, because there are times where I can't stand the sound of my own voice. I just like talking into microphones. That's my problem. So I don't know what to tell you there. Demo wise, depending on what the demo is, Kevin hit on it before. Give them your best. I mean, you've got 20 seconds. Even if they ask for a 3-minute demo, you've got those first 20 seconds. Give it your best. I would say read how you would announce some names if you're doing the starting lineup. Follow that up with just a short bit of copy. And I know that seems like a lot to put into 20 seconds, but do it. And that's the best way to approach it. And listen to your demo a lot. Critique it. Listen to the people you love listening to, and then listen to yourself. See what you can gather from that. Make it your own. And yeah, that's literally that's my answer to both questions because
Yeah.
like right now I can't stand my voice.
I love it. I think it's great.
Kevin, going out for a beer later.
Hey, Amit. So I think one of the things with the demo is it make it unique to the sport that you're auditioning for, right? You know what goes into, and all sports are different. Don't feel like you have to do an entire starting lineup. That would take too long, right? So just do a couple. Pick the best names that you could do. Interject your own uniqueness to that. How you want to see yourself sort of progressing in the industry. I always look. So I tend to be an excitable guy. So a lot of my calls tend to be sort of over the top, if you will. And I always remember that interview with Bob Shepard in CNN. He's like, in the interview, he's like, I'm not like these guys today, these carnival barkers who feel like they have to scream. I have never felt so self-judged by Bob. That's what I kind of like.
Yeah.
That's how I've decided that that's going to be, how I'm going to approach this, and again, I try to just sort of ride that line of being professional while being excitable, but not being just a screamer, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's just a fine line you sort of draw there. I think it's really about it's your passion, it's your personality going into these things. All that's going to show, And Colin, I really think it's your personality that I've already seen from our time together here. You're a personable guy, witty, and I think that all comes out where it's creating Colin Cosell's unique style that has really served himself well. So a lot of that, there's so many elements that go into it beyond just talking into a microphone. It goes. It's more than that, if you will, right? And all that can be developed.
100%. And I, that's really funny. I forgot about Bob Shepard saying that. And I feel like given my personality, and I'm very excitable as well, like if anyone were to go back and watch the darts broadcast from last night, you'd be like, wow, what an idiot. Bob Shepard would hate me. So I feel like that's a personal affront from the grave by the great Bobby Shepard. But yeah, everything Kevin said, 100%.
Where can I find this? Where can I find this call from the darts? Is it online?
Yeah, you go to YouTube, USA Darts Productions, and just watch last night's match. About 29 minutes in, Sean Brenneman of Canada hits a 9-darter, and I just lose it. The best part is he's kind of like walking us through him hitting the 9-darters, so he became my color commentator, which has never happened before. So we kind of made history together. It was kind of funny, but yeah, I lose my marbles.
That's awesome.
Thanks, Omen, for the question. Those are awesome questions. And I agree with both Kevin and Colin. Try to get your stuff in early, make it sport specific. Sometimes it depends. Sometimes, I call a lot of different sports. So when I send things around, you want to give that multi-sports feel to employers because you want to show them that you can do more than one thing. But it depends on who you're, applying for. If you're applying for a soccer gig, it should only be soccer stuff with the lineup with soccer and, a couple of reads there, and the same for baseball and so forth. Very good question. Joe Mocker, I know, Joe, you came in earlier, and Joe, come on back in and say hello to the guys.
Hi, how's it going? First off, I really want to thank Kevin and just both of you for being here. It's truly an honor to speak with you. My question was, so I'm graduating college this semester, and I've always been interested in PA announcing, but I wasn't able to find an opportunity at my college. I went for multiple sports, and the athletics department basically said to me, we have our guy. So I went to the guys, and I told them, like, hey, I'll do this for free. Like, I just want to learn or be a part of it. But there never seemed to be an opportunity that presented itself. So how would you go about finding opportunities in the PA industry?
Where do you live, Joe?
I live in Freehold. It's in like central New Jersey.
Absolutely, yeah. So you're in a great location as far as being centrally located between New York and Philadelphia. And there's a minor league and other organizations, right? Matt, you're with the Somerset Patriots, right, Matt? Or are you at Somerset, Matt Nelson? Yes, he is. Yeah. So you know what, Joe? I think it's just really so you're in a good spot where you've got a lot of opportunity around you, right? And so I think it's just a matter of sitting down and saying, okay, where are these opportunities in my where I can get to, right? And then from there, it's what can I do in any capacity to be part of one of these organizations, you know? And really, it's just a matter of trying to find that one foot in the door, which could then lead to other opportunities. And maybe it's not even starting at the minor league level. Maybe it's, you know, trying to do stuff within the high school levels, you know, and then as you're doing it, you know, make yourself recordings of you doing it, right? And you don't even have to have a game, right? Just make recordings of yourself doing it at home, and just continue to work on that and get that out there, right? And so really, I think it's just a matter of just trying to find in any capacity those opportunities to give yourself an opportunity to get in front of a mic. And I know sometimes without some connections, it's more challenging than others, but persistence, I find, often pays off, right? So hopefully that helps. Colin?
Yeah, and then you just keep an eye out for, you know, the sports pages. I mean, you know, just do a Google search of public address announcer, PA announcer. See if those jobs pop up. Do it via, you know, LinkedIn, even a Craigslist or something like that. Or just keep an eye out for Seattle's about to get an NHL team. Put your feelers out on that. You know, look up their website, see what's happening around there. Just check out every possible avenue if you're not afraid to relocate. I think we're both very, very fortunate that, you know, we've been able to stay local with our jobs, but some are willing to relocate. I remember I applied for the Chicago Cubs job. I auditioned for it, their PA announcer job. It was like 10 years ago. The guy who got it, Andrew, is just, I mean, he's phenomenal. So I can't say I blame them, but, you know, but I was willing to relocate to Chicago if that's what I needed to do. So, you know, just keep searching the web, put yourself out there, apply. And in the meantime, practice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
One other thing too, Joe, what you can do is, you know, ask if, you know, go to these teams and say, hey, I'm an aspiring public address announcer. Would you mind if I could maybe sit in on a game and hear your PA announcer call and sort of, that's almost a sort of a way to get your foot in the door in some respects too, you know? So I've done that countless times, and it's been helpful. So that could be another way too. Just try and see if you can go and shadow, you know, these areas, see where that takes you.
Awesome. Kevin, Colin, Dave, as usual. Thank you guys so much, and I really appreciate you guys taking your time to do this.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
Joe, those are great questions. And for all of us on here, it is not easy, the path that we chose and the road that we're going on. A lot of times, you know, we've said on this call, the 99 no's before one yes. And I think you need to be creative, innovative. Don't be discouraged if you get a no. Try to connect with people like our guests today, others in here. And it's not all about people that are, you know, in the jobs that you want, but it's also people at your level. There's guys on here, men and women, that are in positions that can help you as well. So you never know. And it's just, you know, getting your name out there and, you know, simply put to an employer that might not have an opportunity now, but do you know somebody, or do you know a local high school or small college or a D1 college that may have a need? And it might be in a smaller sport that you've never done. Scott has mentioned water polo a bunch on here. He's brought in a lot of opportunities. Some of you probably have never seen a water polo event played out or just watched it on television. So taking an opportunity in a sport or an event that you haven't done, and it might not even be sports, by the way. I know, I'm sure Kevin and Colin have stories on, you know, events they've announced or, you know, been a house guy for, you know, a theater group. You know, please unwrap the candy now, and silence your phones, that type of thing. So just a piece of advice there. I know Stephen Eggert, if you're on, you had a question. I know you can't raise your hand, and then we'll let the final three guys and let Kevin and Colin go because they've been on for hours with us. So, Steve, if you're on, go ahead and ask your question.
Hold on, Steve. I think you got to unmute yourself, buddy.
Yep.
There you go.
Oh, cool. I was going to say, hey, Dave, thank you again for organizing all of this. Kevin, Colin, thank you for joining us. I apologize for the outfit. I was on the golf course, didn't have much time to change before this. So if you need sunglasses, by all means.
Now's not a time to brag, Steven. I would give anything to be on a golf course.
Oh my God.
Did you get your gear from Oregon?
No, Nike. That's not a plug, I promise. So anyway, just from listening to all this, you two appear to have like very different paths. Kevin, you talked about how your path was basically like, oh, this looks like fun, so I'm going to see how I do with this, and you're obviously doing very well, and you've been successful with it. Colin, you've been more of a lifelong student with this, if you will, just being in theater, comedy, sports, and growing up with your grandfather inspiring you and all of that. My question actually is having to do with scripts and writing. Describe your experience with describe the value of being able to be a good writer in all of this, and your experience with that, and being able to understand how to write for your natural voice. If that makes sense. Just to be able to know what you can say well and know what naturally rolls with you guys. Is there anything that you've noticed throughout your careers that's worked best for you? And has there been any advice you've gotten along the way?
Well, for me, I'm a history teacher, not an English teacher. So luckily I don't have to write the scripts very often. So they're sort of presented to me. But I will tell you that the quality of the script makes all the difference when you're doing PA announcing. The way it's being written, sometimes you do have to sort of manipulate the copy because it may sound better, while not necessarily manipulating the message, because that's not for you to do. But right. A certain way it might be worded that might not sound right. It might be somebody in the marketing department who wrote the script, and that it might sound better, and you can keep the main idea and sort of shift around the wording a little bit. So that's kind of what you do. And you sort of find your announcing voice, and you sort of know what it should sound like. And sometimes you shift the script around because you need to try to get that announcing voice that maybe the wording of the script won't get you the way it is on the page. And I think that's really the value too of where you're going. As you make your way and you get more experience, you develop the ability to say, I think it sounds better this way. Right. But that's just, they're little words, you're not changing the entire thing. Right. Because Colin, you get yourself in trouble, you start really changing scripts around. Right.
Yeah. That especially Major League Baseball, especially with the Mets, they're very strict with that. But they have afforded me the luxury to change the wording around, perhaps too much alliteration or not enough, or perhaps it's going to lend itself where I'm going to stumble over a word because of the way they phrased it. And they do allow me to mess with that a little bit. New York Riptide, on the other hand, they're like, go ahead and make it your own. So I'm realizing the more I talk about this, I have carte blanche with the New York Riptide. Wow, the power I've got. But I think an idea is to definitely get used to writing your own copy. If there's a subject you can think of and you're going to speak about it, like the brand new, the 2021 Chevy Tahoe, and the descriptions of it. If there's a commercial for it, get a printout. You can just look up advertising copy, a printout of it, read it a couple times, have an idea about it, and then from memory, speak it in a way that sounds comfortable to you, the way it sounds good to you, and record that. And then transcribe that and compare the two, because that's going to be your voice transcribed as opposed to someone else's words transcribed. And it's just something to have in the back of your head, and it's just a quick, easy trick so you can actually manipulate a script to sound a little bit better like your voice. But copywriting skills outside of that, I think, are imperative. It makes you more dynamic. It's going to give you a leg up should something suddenly go wrong and too many things are going on around you. And by the way, Colin, we need to throw this in the middle of the sixth inning here. Can you draw something up real quick that sounds coherent and concise? But otherwise, trust the script writers, but learn about your voice and how it transcribes to paper.
Thank you guys very much.
All right, Steve. Take care, buddy.
Thank you, Stephen. It was a pleasure seeing you from space.
I think you're muted.
Dave, you're a professional here. You know to unmute yourself. Come on, this is your 47th Zoom today.
You know, I know, and it takes me. It's like every time around the 2-3 hour mark is when it happens, and I try to be diligent on that. But yeah, no, but Steve, you know this. We know each other personally. We've worked with sports teams together. Broadcast writing very different from writing for for a paper or anything like that, or a recap or a sidebar for newspaper, magazine, media guy that I know you've done personally very well. So a lot of time, what Kevin and Colin are saying there, totally agree. Sometimes you got to say it out loud and see if it sounds good.
For sure, yeah. I know we've had plenty of conversations about writing and the importance of that to what we do, and we've seen it put together and into action. So definitely appreciate those conversations for sure.
Yeah, let's keep it going. Thanks, Steve. Continued success and go for a couple birdies in a row on the golf course, my man. Kai Dombach. Kai is calling from Germany, I believe, unless you've been traveling around.
No.
I don't think you were, but this is not West Side Story, Colin. This is Kai from Germany. And Kai, go ahead. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much. With the coronavirus going down here in Germany, like I may be calling a game next week for the first time. Big lost about that. But to my questions, I actually have a couple. I apologize if these have been asked before. The thing is, like, I had to take a call about the potential upcoming broadcast. So again, apologies if I missed these questions and if they've been asked before. So I've covered baseball in Japan, and they have announcements for foul balls. Like they have like some people in the stands that blow whistles, or they have like announcements over the board. Sorry, there was a fly that ran in my face. Do you think that would be wise to do that in the U.S.? And also, how do you develop your comedic chops?
So with foul balls, I don't think it's going to be necessary in the U.S. because I believe all Major League Baseball parks by 2021 or 2022 are going to have the netting on the side. So then it's takes care of itself. Comedic chops, just be funny, I guess. Start watching stand-up comedy, see what resonates with you, and see if you're able to replicate that style of humor. And make it your own. Like, I think there can only be one John Mulaney in the world right now, and I think he's the funniest human being walking in America. But at the same time, I grew up thinking Eddie Murphy was the greatest thing ever. And though, for politically correctness, it did not age well. It's still one of the greatest, most quotable stand-up comedy routines of all time. And then you've got a George Carlin who's a stand-up philosopher. So that is it's up to you. If you've got the comedic timing, you've got it. Not every joke hits. Believe me, that's the story of my life. The fact that I've seen some people laugh here today really just kind of made my day. So I still got it.
Do you work in soccer?
Yes. Yes, I work in soccer. I'm willing to do any sport anywhere. My main focus is soccer.
And who's your Bundesliga team you follow?
So the thing is, like, I'm just put on whatever game my guys decide that we should be on. But if I had to choose a team, like, it would be Borussia Dortmund. Yeah.
One of the best in-stadium environments you're ever going to see is a Dortmund match. I mean, their tifo is second to none in the world.
Yeah, like I also work as a photographer. A lot of times I try to go to the Dortmund games, even though it's about a 2.5-3 hour trip one way. I'm just like, I gotta go to these guys because it's amazing. Like it's almost deafening being in front of that yellow wall when they score a goal.
Yeah. And they were smart enough to sign Pulisic too, so they can't be all bad, right? Give the Americans a chance.
I got to tell you, Zach Steffen is with Dusseldorf right now, as you probably know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've also gone up to Dusseldorf to take a few pictures of him. Unfortunately, I was also taking a few pictures of him in Dortmund when he gave up 4 goals in the second half. And every time I click the shutter of him in frame, I'm like, I am so sorry, buddy, because I called him when he was a Maryland Terrapin, because I went to the University of Maryland, and like it was so amazing watching him there. And I'm just like, oh man, sorry, snap, snap, snap.
It wasn't his fault. It was the defenders in front of him.
Oh, definitely. Oh, definitely. It was just like, this is not going to be a fun night for you.
That's every goalie's perspective, right? The goal's never their fault. They're always pointing fingers.
Yeah, and yes, he did just get hurt again, Skylar. Yes, I was actually trying to do an interview with him a few months ago for where I work, and then they just said, hey, he's doing rehab. I'm sorry, he can't do this. And it's like, so I've been trying to do it, set it up for a few months now, but it just doesn't work out. That's how it is sometimes.
Great talking to you, Kai.
Yep, you too. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kai. Stay healthy out there. Sean McMenamin. Sean, Pride of Temple. Go ahead, Sean.
Yes. Thanks for having me on, Dave. Once again, these are great meetings. Really glad to be a part of them. And the question that I had it could be for Kevin and Colin. How are you able to captivate the home audience in an exciting or interactive way? Or what is the top way to bring the crowd together with your call?
Sean, show Colin your shirt first.
First of all, why didn't anyone tell me we were supposed to wear our Fight for Philly shirts today? I mean, I'm sporting my beautiful Now on Deck shirt, but I don't understand. I don't understand what's going on here. No one told me.
He's got his shirt on too. He's got a better beard than me too, Jimbo.
Jim, with a beard like that, Jimbo should be brewing some fine IPA. My God.
Get it going, Jimbo. Have a happy hour session.
All right. So I'll tackle this one first here, Sean.
Yeah, please.
Yep.
So, like I said earlier, right? So the goal, my goal as a public address announcer is to facilitate the show and not be the show, right? And so, again, like Colin has said, you're reading the audience. You're reading the fans. When they're really excited because it's a point in the match that warrants them to be really excited. So then that, in turn, allows me as a PA announcer to be really excited as well. So it's sort of like a bit of a dance between the fan base, between what's going on in the match and then what you have to announce, right? Because you want to convey that level of excitement, When Marco Fabian scores the go-ahead goal in the playoff game against the Red Bulls, that level of excitement warrants a bigger than normal call from me. But if Marco Fabian scores and we're down 4-0, then obviously you're going to pull back on that call because you're getting smoked, right? So you don't want to necessarily – you got to put it in its proper context and reading the crowd, and then being able to feed off of that's only going to help it as well. And Colin, obviously, your Riptide experience really, kind of lends itself to that too, right?
I mean, with the Riptide, one of your roles is cheerleader. You're trying to keep everyone amped for 60 straight minutes and of action at least. So that kind of differs, as Kevin said, and we both agree that with whether it's soccer or it's baseball, your team success is the barometer by which you follow your getting the crowd amped. And if the Mets are getting destroyed 14-2 in the second inning, no one's going to want them to be like, hey, everybody, it's Michael Conforto. They're going to be like, shut up, you jerk. We suck today. And I'm going to be like, I'm sorry. So it's it is reading the crowd and just being like, the center fielder, number 30, Michael Conforto, because we're doing terribly right now. So it is one of those just read the room type of things. And if it calls for you to get amped, then so be it. But if it's also been 5 innings of lackluster, whatever, maybe now's the time to turn it up a notch and try to get them back into it. Maybe the crowd or the players will feed off of that. But that's with Riptide, I can start a "Let's Go Riptide" chant and know they're going to follow suit. So you can't quite do that with the Mets. We just have our little "Let's Go Mets" ribbons going around and some sort of graphic pulsating on City Vision, and the crowd just knows what to do from there.
Yeah, that's all right. Apparently, my house is falling down to the right over there. If you guys heard that,
I did. You all right?
I can't really confirm or deny at this point if I'm okay, but I think I am.
Just keep the camera on you at all times and blink twice if you need help, Kevin. I'll be right there.
Hey, real quick, Sean, too. So I used to do Philadelphia Wings games, and that was about as close to Roman Gladiator, I think, as you ever get in the professional sporting. And so when we would have one of those knockdown, drag out 4, fights at the same time, and then it would come time to announce the penalties, we would announce the visiting penalties in a very professional manner, but then we would announce the Wings fighting penalties as if they just scored the game-winning goal. And that just fed into everybody. So it's that amount. One other story that I wanted to share with you guys in a Wings game is 2 guys come into the box and they just both had penalties and they're jawing at each other the entire time they're in the box. And our guy looks at the penalty box official at the conclusion of his penalty and says, "Keep the door open. I'll be right back." Ooh. I thought, man, and he went out and just lays out this guy and sure enough gets a penalty again. I thought, man, that is the coolest line I think I've ever heard in a sporting event. So those memories from Wings games were some of the best I've had announcing. So enjoy that, Colin, man. That's going to be a fun ride for you.
I mean, very unfortunately, the Riptide came away with 1 win. We were 1-12, so I went absolutely ballistic when we scored an overtime game winner. But other than that, yeah, it was just, I don't know. It was just kind of fun ripping on these people. And then I remember I turned to one player and I was like, "I'm really sorry." It's just like, "Oh, dude, we don't even hear you." It's like, "But you sound great." I'm like, "I just called you a schmuck. Like, are you kidding me? Are you sure this is all right?"
Yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah. And then one other question I had for you, Kevin. I did have the honor of meeting you at a Temple LaSalle game in November. I introduced myself to you. That was awesome. And then I really loved how you did those goal calls, custom ones for Union fans. You did one for me. It was awesome. I loved hearing it. Still listen to it, to this day. So my question to you was, what is your favorite Union goal call that you have announced over the years? And maybe can you give us a Union goal call, like a player of your choice right now?
Yes, I want that too, Kevin.
So obviously, Sean, the 2 goal calls stick out. One, and both were from last year. One would be the Marco Fabian playoff goal because of its importance, right? But then there was a match midsummer. Dave, help me out. I think it was against Dallas. It was either Dallas or Red Bulls when Ilsinho came into the match and just took over the match.
Red Bull, yep.
Red Bull, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Bedoya, was that the one where Bedoya scored to go ahead and put us ahead in stoppage time, or was that the Dallas game?
I think that was the Dallas game.
So I'm mixing those 2 up, but it was that Bedoya call. So I'm going to give you the Bedoya call. You ready? All right. Union goal scored by number 11, Alejandro Bedoya.
Woo! That was awesome. Bye, guys.
My kids are in the house right now going, "Is he doing that again? Is he done?"
I love it. Oh, that was awesome.
Yeah, look, Skylar's ready for we got Union fans left on here now.
Yeah, we do have several Union fans on here. That was awesome.
I am so glad that
oh, here we go. Go ahead, Bruce.
Call for the kid from Weston, Florida.
Oh,
God. The Orlando City PA guy?
No, I'm the Orlando City play-by-play guy. I'm on the other side of the fence with Dave.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, you got a much tougher job than we have.
Yeah, because we don't score goals.
Go ahead, Bruce, please.
And you had my boy Fafa up there the last couple of years.
Another great name to call.
Who I had the pleasure when he was with the Fort Lauderdale Strikers and I was the voice of the Strikers. Dave asked me to jump in and tell a couple of stories. Somebody had mentioned, what do you do if there's a rain delay? And I've dealt with 2 of them. The first one was Fort Lauderdale Strikers when Fafa was playing, and the lights went out
at Lockhart Stadium in the second half. We were doing the game on radio, so we stayed on the air for 45 minutes until they powered the lights back up. And basically, we talked over, told stories, and the board op basically ran every song having to do with light under our conversation. So we had everything from Flashlight by Parliament to Blinded by the Light, and I think we actually did both of those. I think we actually played Man for Man and Springsteen, and then debated which one was better. These are the things that you do when you're doing a broadcast and things don't go the way they're planned. And people understand it and they appreciate it, and you just go with it. And, earlier in the conversation, it was all about what do you do for game prep? And I know PA announcers have different formulas for game prep that say Dave and I do, because we're prepping for different things. Colin had made mention that play-by-play guys they need all these stories to tell in baseball. Dave and I need those stories too, because you get into a snoozer of a soccer match where nothing's going on and all the activity is in the middle and there's no shots on goal, and basically the goalkeepers have gone out into the stands to get hot dogs. You have to have something in your arsenal to be able to tell stories on. So we definitely did that I think it was 2015 or 14 with the Strikers. But Dave will remember this, and Kevin, you will remember this too. Last season, Orlando City in Philadelphia to play a game that doesn't get played until the next day. And I know Dave and I were texting throughout everything. Yeah. We ended up, we do a half-hour pregame show, and then obviously the 2-hour broadcast and a half an hour postgame. Last season, I don't know what you guys did, Dave, on TV, but basically we stayed on the air for over 2 hours before they called that match, because it took about 2 hours to cancel it. And that's when you're really stretching the limits of what you can talk about, and you don't plan for those things. And that really goes towards, you need to know your subject matter. Obviously, this is play-by-play and not PA. You need to know your subject matter. You need to be able to be so well-versed in your team, in the sport, but then at some point you also have to go off and start talking about things just to keep people interested and just to keep yourself interested. And that's where I think just preparing in general is important. But I want to ask this question to both Kevin and Colin, since everybody else is asking questions. And Dave, maybe you would jump in on this too. I have always felt that it was more difficult doing play-by-play, doing color, doing PA at the lower levels than it is at the major league level. Because at the major league level, there's producers and there's, multiple levels of bosses and everything else. And for the most part, you get spoon-fed. I realize that that's not always the case in every sport at every major league level, but the same goes for like TV and everything else. When you're first starting out, you're one-man banding. They give you a microphone, they give you a camera, they say go. And you sink or swim all by yourself, and you're figuring out how to do creative stand-ups without standing behind the camera. And when you get to the network levels, you're getting producers and you're getting writers and you're getting this and you're getting that. And literally it's someone just saying, here, stick you in front of the camera and say go. And I think, Kevin and Colin were talking about their pathway to where they've gotten and the success they've had. And there is no straight line. But I will tell you this, I think the best people in our business are the ones that have stories like Kevin's, like Colin's, like Dave's, like mine, as opposed to the ones that are just plucked out of wherever, whether it's out of college or, they come from a professional sports background and somebody just says, oh, you retired last week. Okay, here's a microphone, go. And I think those people that don't pay their dues have no idea what really to do if you take away all of those people that have basically backed them up.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, Bruce, 100%. Also, happy belated birthday. It was Bruce's birthday on Tuesday. Cinco de Mayo, baby. When it comes to, there's no way to candy coat it. I am basically spoon fed. I have to do my own research on pronunciations, what have you, for Major League Baseball. NLL is different. Obviously, I have to do my own research on that, but that's on PA. But as a play-by-play guy, especially in the high school level, with MSG Varsity and with Verizon Files One Sports, you are in charge of getting. There's no media guide. You're not in Texas where they would have a media guide. But I mean, you're in the Northeast corridor. You're not going to have a media guide for Rye Country Day School in Westchester County. You're not going to have that for Senator Rich's High School out here in Suffolk. It's not a thing. So you have to hunt down these coaches. And some of them don't get back to you until 24 hours, maybe even 12 hours before game day. And this could be for the playoffs. And I'm telling them, I want the kids to sound and look good. I need background on them. I need just a little bit of information.
Don't you find that sometimes we care more?
100%. They think, they're like, it doesn't matter. And I'm like, their kids are going to be on TV. I would have loved to have one of my high school hockey playoff games on TV to go home and watch that. Are you kidding me? With play-by-play and at least a 3 to 5 camera shot? Of course. But this jackass is like, I'll get to him eventually. It's just like, here's my roster. Well, can you tell me more about this kid?
You want to talk about baptism by fire? Back in, it was either late December or January, I was doing an ABA basketball game in the studio out of Miami. And it was just supposed to be me, no color guy or anything. So I asked the studio, I said, hey, do you guys mind if my son does color for me? He's a basketball player. He wants to be a broadcaster in college. They said, fine, we can't pay him. I said, no problem. So he's going to do this. First thing that happens, we get there, we're delayed by an hour. So at least we didn't have to go on the air and BS for an hour. But then the second part of it was we get on there, and even after the hour delay, we only have one of the two teams' rosters. So literally it was names for one team and numbers for the other guys. And this happened throughout. We never got it. So you're doing a play-by-play of a game in which you only know who half of the people are. And I know somebody mentioned you just got to roll with the punches and be confident. And that's what I would suggest to everybody is you're not going to have all the answers. Pronunciations are never easy. When you do play-by-play, you can kind of fudge it a little bit because you can always just avoid somebody and just not say their name. You can't do that when you're saying now batting and leave it at that. You got to say the person's name. Kevin, I will say this. If I was doing the games and Fred was on the pitch, I would have gone with what's his name from Smokey and the Bandit, Jerry Reed. The dog's name was Fred. And I just would have gone Fred.
Yes.
So hindsight.
I just prayed he didn't score. And Bruce, going back to your point, I think that those experiences that I've had in minor league baseball were the most valuable experiences of my entire career because I truly believe that it prepared me to do anything. It laid that foundation for me then to go to the next levels because of the skill set that I was able to learn while at those minor league levels and having to do it all on my own. When you're spoon-fed, that little bit of time you might have to ad-lib when everybody's freaking out because they're not used to ad-libbing, you think this is nothing. I got this, right? And then that develops that trust of, okay, well, he can handle those situations. And that's all because of those experiences that I've had in minor league baseball and elsewhere, and I wouldn't really have traded.
Well, and I think not only is it all of that, but it's the ability to be a little bit more creative and the ability to know that it's okay not to be perfect. Because when you do minor league baseball and then you go to do major league baseball, it's no different than a player being down on the farm. If you're gonna make a mistake, make it in front of a small crowd. Don't make it in front of a big crowd. and make it where people maybe aren't paying attention or probably don't care as much. But also, I think that's where you get the confidence to be bold and to take chances, because as Colin was saying with the lacrosse league, I mean, it sounds like if you're the PA announcer for the National Lacrosse League, that you could basically grab a stick, run onto the field, hit a couple of guys, and as long as you got a microphone in your other hand, you're good to go.
And I did.
There you go.
Let me ask you this, and Bruce, you're on there. You do play-by-play. I wanted several of the guys and girls wrote to me about this. Kevin and Colin, how do you guys stay in it, engaged? You're not doing play-by-play. You're doing public address. Colin, it's got to be. I mean, it's tough for both of your sports, but Colin, you're doing a 3, could be 4, could be 5-hour baseball game. So, people wanted me to ask you: Are you keeping a book on your own? How are you following the guys? You just using the flip card that the team gives you? Kevin, same thing during a soccer game. You know, you sometimes if I'm doing pre-half post, I'll stop in the booth. You're great. You can talk to people. You can still follow the action, get your sponsors in. How do you? That's important because some people might tend to miss a call at the right time or a play. You guys are seasoned pros, so you can handle 15 things at once. I know that's, as a play-by-play guy, you have to do that all the time. So maybe Colin, starting with you, baseball game, how do you stay in it the whole way and not miss a beat?
It's funny. I have definitely in my short 2 years as a Major League Baseball PA announcer, have experienced both possible extremes. We had a 5.5 hour rain delay one time. That was obviously one extreme. And at that point, I really got to know Citi Field really well. I checked out every possible square foot of that facility. We played some video games, we quiz games and whatever. And my spotter was watching a movie. During a game that's really slow and boring, I mean, you know what I'm like now. All of you have seen me. This is me in my element. I'm just a jackass, a smart ass. I'm cracking jokes. It's what I do. And that's what I'm doing constantly during the game. That being said, so I'm trying to keep myself entertained, my spotter entertained. And sometimes we're just crowd searching. I mean, like, you got 45,000 people in front of you. That's a hell of a lot of people watching. So you can like start pinpointing what's going on with different things. And, come up with little stories for them. Like, I don't know what their backstory is, but ooh, I can make it up based on the way they're dressed. But then you have on the opposite end of the spectrum, last year on September 11th, Thursday, September 11th, no, it was Wednesday. It was Wednesday, September 11th against the Arizona Diamondbacks. D-backs were getting smoked by the Mets, and they were just clinging on to playoff hopes, and we had basically destroyed it by the third inning. Well, 7th inning stretch comes along. I've got to read some copy. We've got to take me out to the ball game. I've got to take Mr. and Mrs. Met off the field after they're done shooting T-shirts into the crowd. And the next thing you know, the Diamondbacks have performed a septuple switch. They're going out into the field. Now, double and triple switches, that's one thing. You know, and those are a pain in the ass. They substituted 7 of their 9 players, one of them being the pitcher with the next available batter, which is what would happen with a double switch if you're not familiar, to make sure that the next person up at bat is not going to be the pitcher. Well, this was a septuple switch. They changed out 7 players, and I finished up my copy, no idea, oblivious that all hell's about to break loose. I hear, I know there's going to be some changes. All of a sudden I hear my spotter go, oh, shit. Now, this kid is completely unflappable. He's on top of everything. This guy on Jackie Robinson Day, when everyone's wearing number 42, was able to pinpoint a defensive change that was made in the second inning because he recognized the person's face was different and said, hey, wait a minute, we got a defensive change. This kid is that good. I hear him say that, and I look up, and I'm like, what's going on? Our director goes, okay, guys, you got to go with changes. We'll run out of time. He goes, hold on a second, Vito. He goes, no, we got to go with changes. We're running out of time. He goes, V, we can't. He goes, why not? He goes, because they changed the whole effing team. And I'm like, all right, what do we got? And I'm looking out there, and we're reading through it, and time is ticking, and Major League Baseball will fine us $10,000 if we don't get the next batter in by a certain amount of time. And all of a sudden, boom, we just go, ladies and gentlemen, Now entering the game for the Arizona Diamondbacks and playing center field, blah, 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 blah. And entering the game and moving to left field, this, that, and the other thing. We just plowed through it. The next person at bat, the center fielder, number 30, Michael Conforto. And I threw down my headset, look up, the clock is going 2, 1. And I literally jumped up. I think we cried, we hugged. I don't think we've ever looked at each other the same way. It was just such an emasculating moment. We got through it. And for all the times we've sat there during boring baseball, for the rest of my career, so help me God, that will make up for it.
Colin, I'm picturing the Bugs Bunny episode where now playing first base, Bugs Bunny. Second base.
Yeah, Bugs Bunny. Strike 1, 2, 3, you're out.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It was insane.
Soccer is obviously a little bit slower. What inevitably happens in soccer is that you'll have nothing to do, but then everything to do all at once. You'll get a sub, a caution, and a goal all at once. But we're at the luxury of only having to worry about 3 subs, so I only have to do that 6 times a game with both teams. Inevitably, the friendlies are where it gets tricky because they want to make 11 at halftime. And
try doing play-by-play of a friendly where just in the middle of a game they'll change out 9 of the 11 and nobody's numbers match anything on your sheet. Right. It's a free-for-all. I have done so many friendlies and there are guys in friendlies that will show up on the pitch who the number doesn't match anything. But you talk about, Colin was talking about like the junior stuff. I did junior NBA at Disney a couple of years ago, and I was doing a game, and I've got the roster, and I spent all night the night before working out and everything. And game starts, and there's a kid wearing number 44 who's on the floor, and there is no 44 on any roster, no talk back button, nothing. I mean, literally, it's a headset, and you're sitting in the stands with the fans calling a game. It took me about a quarter to figure out that the one kid wearing 44 was the one kid on my roster that hadn't entered the game. So it was like he was number 2 on the roster, but he was wearing 44. So I just kind of figured it out and went with it. And after the game, found out that I was right. But this goes to, Kevin, you were saying it, you got to just do it with confidence.
Yeah.
I know that I have mispronounced names on the air. Dave, I'm sure you've done it. And I do it with a tremendous amount of confidence. And if I find out that I mispronounced the guy's name, I'll make the correction and go with it. But you also can't trust the people that give you the information. And this is the best example I can give. When I was doing striker games, good friend of mine, Chris Lidholm, some of you may know him, does games or did games for Minnesota United. And we were talking before the game, and he said, keeper for us today is Sammy Njak, and his name was spelled N-J-U or J-A-C-K. He said it's Njak. Okay, so I'm doing a game. Halftime, I get a text from the league. His name is Njak. So the league officer happened to be in the stadium, and I said, I was just talking to their PA announcer who was speaking to Sammy, and Sammy said, my name is Njak. And he looked at me and he said, you're going to call him Njak. I was like, you know what? Fine. The rest of the game, I called him Sammy.
It became Brazilian real quick.
Oh, you know what? As far as I'm concerned, every soccer player is Brazilian. Every guy is Fred.
Yeah, right.
I don't care if you have an easy first name and a hard last name, your name is the first name. And that's just the way it is. And if it's my team, I'm giving out nicknames. I will create nicknames at the beginning of the season and just go with it. Fafa never even knew he had a last name. How about that? And he's Haitian.
He's got a last name, though.
And I don't know if you guys remember James Marceline, who played for the Timbers, played for Sporting KC, a long time in the NASL. He was Big James Marceline, and everyone in Fort Lauderdale knew him as Big James. And PC, who played for Orlando City, his name is Victor Guerrero Jr. There's a tradition with Corinthians that kids coming up, the best of the kids coming up, they get the nickname PC for whatever reason. Well, every time he got hit, he would make this face. He would grimace. So I started calling him Grimace on the air, and that picked up. So that goes to the ability to be creative and to get the confidence to do that at lower levels, so that when you get to the upper levels, you have a vernacular, you have a pace, and people who hired you at the upper levels already knew what you were doing at the lower levels. So it wasn't like it was a surprise for them when you started handing out nicknames like their participation trophies at the elementary school level.
No, those are great stories, and I appreciate you sharing all that stuff. My thanks to Kevin, Colin. I can't thank you enough for spending over 3 hours with us today. This was really enjoyable. I learned a lot. I know everybody learned a lot. We're forever grateful to you guys for spending all this time. We know you're both busy with your families and your lives, and continued health and happiness to you both, and hopefully see you soon.
It's just like doing an afternoon ball game. It's like a 1 o'clock start. We finish at 4:08 p.m. It's perfect. I feel like I've been sitting in the booth just talking all day and BSing. So thank you, Dave. This made me feel much more at home. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks for doing this, Dave, man. This is a valuable thing you're doing. Keep it going.
We will. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Colin, again.